Okay. Give it a couple more minutes in case somebody, see, we got 2 people missing. Maybe one of them will show up on Zoom. So I got name tags this week. I should have got them first or before the first class, but if you guys wouldn't mind filling out a name tag, yeah, I've got one last chance to learn your name.
We got him once.
Yeah, that's right. The very first one, Dean brought something. Yeah. And I don't even try it that first class because there's 15, 16 people in here and another 16 on Zoom, and I know I won't remember names. Yeah. Thank you.
We had 2 of them.
There's your special.
I had some labels at home, leftovers from work, and we would write on them and we put something in the freezer. My wife is notorious for writing on the wrong side, so and they're all white, so they're covered in slide, and there's nothing printed on the back, but she's writing on this part. And then she can't get them peeled apart. I know why.
You need one?
What? I got it right away.
He's way ahead of you. He's leading by example. I made him. So what kind of beekeeping stuff did anybody do this week? Research or buying or assembling? You bought one of the mic check things. I was going to mention when Phil was talking and showing those off that prior to last summer, I would always tell people you can just get a mason jar, and you know the band, the ring that screws on, you take a piece of hardware cloth and cut it so it's circular and fits on there, and that's what I had been using. So you put the cup of bees in there, you put the screen on top, you pour the alcohol on, swish it around, you dump it out, the screen keeps the bees in, lets the mites fall through. Unless you set it on your tailgate or your pickup and you knock it off onto the driveway and it breaks. And you got dead bees and mites all over the place that you didn't get to count. It's like, oh. So I'm gonna buy one of the plastic ones from here on out.
And they're on sale.
All right.
And then go to Dollar General and get a really cheap strainer. You can reuse your alcohol several times.
Yeah, I do that too. Yep, strain the mites out of the alcohol and you can reuse it quite a bit. Yeah. Anybody else do anything bee related?
We got those, and I ordered drone frames.
You ordered drone frames. Phil has some that he bought today, so.
We emailed Dean.
You emailed Dean?
Boxes.
You getting some of his used equipment?
Yeah.
We had already had all the equipment. It's in our suits. If you want to grab one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, one thing we haven't talked a whole lot about is extra equipment. Like, it's a really good idea to have a nuke box on hand. If you open up the hive and discovered that you got behind somehow or another and they've got queen cells in there, what I usually recommend is you start taking some frames with queen cells out, put them in new equipment or a nuke box or something, because it's really too late to head off the swarming impulse if they've gotten to the point where they've got capped queen cells. So your best bet is divide the hive up, divide it in half, divide it in 3, so it's not so crowded and they think that they've swarmed, and then you'll get new queens out of those queen cells, those capped queen cells. So yeah, extra equipment is definitely worth having. The boxes that Dean is selling right now, the state inspector has gone through and given his blessing, so you shouldn't have to worry about there being disease or anything in them. They may not be great, but they're cheap.
And then there's some new research out now. I read 2 articles about it, that the queens that are coming out of swarm cells are the superior queens. It's because they have a tendency to be a little bit bigger. They're the ones that the bees intentionally made. So what John is saying is we invested this last year in queen hotels, and it's the same size as a deep, and there's a door on each side and then there's divider slots, and it holds 2 frames, so you can put a frame of feed in, and then that brood frame with the queen cell in, and let her hatch. You can't leave them in there for very long. Once she's hatched and blown, she wants to build, she wants to get going. But what a great way to divvy up swarm cells super fast.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Yeah, especially if you find capped queen cells in the hive, all of the effort, all of the resources, and all of the time, it's in there. Once they're capped, the bees don't have to take care of them. I mean, they need to stay warm, but just being in the hive, they're going to stay warm. But all of the resources in raising those queens. So if you just make a split, let's say you find the original queen in the original hive, so you keep her, you take all of those queen cells and put them in other equipment, you're going to get one new queen out of all of those resources. And then that queen will go out and get mated, and she may not get mated. She may not make it back from the mating flight. She may make it through all of that and then just turn out to be a dud. And you got one dud out of all of that work. The other alternative, if you've got the equipment, you can take pretty much every frame that's got a queen cell on it with the bees and maybe another frame of honey with the bees. So you got 2 frames invested, and you can split that up as many ways as you have queen cells to allow you to do that. Let's say you end up making 6 splits, and let's say 50% of the queens turn out to be duds. Well, now you've got 3 extras, but that's way better than 1 or none, and the bees still did the same amount of work. It does split your original hive pretty thin, but if they were really, really going gangbuster, and that's why they swarmed in the first place, it might not set them back enough. Yeah, they'll recover. You may still get a honey crop out of them, and you've got extra queens, extra hives, extra resources. You can overwinter them. You can give them to somebody else whose bees are having trouble. There's a lot of pluses.
I was just gonna ask if that happens. Call one of you guys or just call somebody else?
Yeah, that works. I mean, it's the best case scenario would be have something on hand. But yeah, if you don't, to call some other beekeepers. Most of us who've been in it a while have plenty of extra stuff hanging around. Another thing, the nuke that you get will usually be in they call it a cardboard box, but it's more like corrugated plastic. And most guys don't want to bother with getting them back. I mean, they're like $20 brand new, so you factor that into the cost of the nuke. So you'll probably end up with that nuke box. Keep it around. You could make a split into that, and if you put 2 frames into that or 2 or 3 frames into that, it can live in that for a few months until you figure out if the queen is good. And
The ones we get come in, they're plastic.
yeah, they call them a cardboard nuke box, but they're really plastic. It's like corrugated cardboard made out of plastic. Both.
No, ours are plastic.
Like the
Oh, brown. Yeah. That's a newer style.
Send those. That's a little more expensive. Yeah, don't get rid of those.
Hey, Dave.
Keep those for back.
Yeah, hang on to those. Those are good resources too. I've heard people complain that they don't hold up in the sun very well for very long, but I haven't experienced it myself.
I think you run a little danger too. Nukes in direct sunlight that much, they don't really like it from what I found. Phillips gone.
Yeah, nukes will get hot in direct sunlight pretty quick too.
Shade with your nukes is pretty good.
Okay, so did everybody get through what I had out there for this week's class, this document? Okay. So any questions or concerns about locations for your beehives? I know sometimes that's a tricky one, or sometimes I feel like it's one we don't cover a whole lot. Everybody have a place lined up for their bees? Yeah, okay.
You're gonna put them somewhere and then later found out like, sounds like a dumb question.
No, no, it's not a bad question at all. A lot of the things that we're looking at here, like pollen sources and nectar sources, aren't always easy to figure out until you put bees there. My first couple of years, I own an acreage out by Ponca, and that's where I wanted the bees. And there's nothing out there but cornfields and bean fields. And it took me a few years to figure out they're not making honey here, and it's not just me. It's partly location. And that's something, you know, unless you know some other beekeepers and talk to them, you know, if other beekeepers say, oh yeah, my bees are bringing in nectar like crazy and yours aren't, and you know, if there's a location separation or a location difference, that might be the reason yours aren't bringing it in. I like Phil, where are you at again?
We're by Union Grove State Park, about 12 miles south of Lewisburg.
Okay, so like last summer, we'd get, no, was it you that was getting rain? He'd get rain and we wouldn't. And the next thing you know, his bees are bringing in nectar like crazy, and my bees are still nothing to do. It's not that much of a difference distance-wise, but it was enough that year that it made a huge difference as far as how my bees reacted compared to his. So Facebook is a good place to ask that question. My bees aren't bringing in nectar. Should they be? What are your bees doing? So the Siouxland Beekeepers Facebook group.
We're down here, and our wildflowers didn't stop blooming until I think the second of the next year. The difference in moisture.
Yeah, it can make a huge difference. Yep.
It usually feels to me like we're about 2 weeks behind Sioux County.
Okay.
Whatever's happening up there, it shouldn't be, but they will have nectar and they will have, you know, the bees starting to fly about 2 weeks before we do, because it tends to be just that much colder right here in this valley.
Yep.
It's all that black dirt up there.
Black dirt. So I'm not a huge proponent of the morning sun idea. I think bees get up when bees get up, but by no means would morning sun hurt. If you have a couple of different locations and one of them has morning sun and one of them doesn't, but you like the other one better, don't worry about morning sun too much. I do like the idea of a little bit of afternoon shade. You know, in August, it gets hot and the bees are really full that time of year. So some afternoon shade's not a bad idea. But especially around here, small hive beetles will really be a problem if the hive is in the shade. Being in at least part sun seems to make a pretty big difference. So don't put them in a shady area. Don't put them in a low-lying, cool, damp area either.
They would be better off on top of a hill in the sunlight all the time than they would in a wooded, shaded area.
Yeah, that's true. Yep. And until you get to winter, and then on top of the hill in the winter, then you're going to have to move them.
That's right.
But you're talking to a guy who moves his once it gets cold, right up alongside the garage, right? So yeah, and you know, there are different ways of doing it, and it's nice if you can put them in one place and leave them all year long. But yeah, when winter rolls around, now you got to start thinking about windbreak, especially around here, windbreak, because we get some real long, real high windy stretches in the cold, and that, you know, that air moving just sucks the moisture or sucks the heat right out of the hive, and they can't keep up. So I think a windbreak is probably more important than insulation. And I'm coming around more and more thinking that I need to start paying more attention to ways of insulating my hives too. Starting to see more research that's making me think, yeah, we shouldn't have been ignoring the insulation like we have been the last, I don't know how many years. So
That's what I'm building for my first hive, is some laying.
Alayans.
Yeah, and then I have my vet in Willis.
Yeah,
Cramper,
Phil, yeah.
He's gonna shear his sheep here in April, so the wool
Okay,
is what you use to insulate those.
okay.
Yeah.
Real wool for insulation.
Yeah.
Does that go on the top of the hive
No,
or
you
all
build a
over?
cavity.
Oh.
It's like two layers, and then you just fill it full of wool. So I'm not sure how that.
How do you-
Back to the shade thing?
Yeah.
This might be a stupid question, but how come they pull it off when they're like when a wild hive's in trees?
Sure.
What's the difference between?
Yeah,
I mean, is there some natural immunity to some of those things that we have problems with? And
sure. So there's probably a lot of things going on there. When you compare a beehive like that to a bee colony that moves into a tree, depends a lot on the tree, but for the most part, a hollow tree, you're talking 4 inches of wood all the way around it.
Okay.
And then if you've ever done studies on setting out swarm traps, somebody has figured out the things that a swarm of bees is looking for, and they're usually 20 feet off the ground, in the shade with an entrance that faces north. Is that right? North? South? Is it south?
I think CD ran both directions. It's the south.
It was the south, okay. And right down to the size of the opening. So
Yeah.
they figured out the bees' preferences. So in some, a little bit of shade, not a low-lying area, but in some sort of shade, that's one of the preferences. And then up in the air, and then, yeah, I think the natural insulation of the wood is one of the
difference
differences.
between the feral bee colony and the trees is they're that far off the ground. They like to be 20 feet or so off the ground.
Yep,
Okay.
If you put your hive down in a deep, low-lying area, you are subjecting yourself to potential for hive beetles.
yeah,
And that's my problem. Like, I live in the bluff in Jackson, and I'm all low. I mean, I start up high, halfway up the bluff, but like, I'm gonna get down in a ton of timber, and so I'm kind of.
Put them in a tree and then hook up a deer stand and check.
There you go.
Yeah, so you have to climb it every time.
Big part of it too, Jeff, with the shade is dappled versus dense.
Sure.
And so I think a lot of times we think shade, let's put them in a place, and it's shady, and it's just too much. So if you got them where they can get a little sunlight, like cottonwood trees are my favorites, just because of the way those leaves move around.
Right, yeah.
They get sunshade combinations.
well, and those leaves are really high on a cottonwood tree, so the understory is a little more open, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I do need to get out to your place and take a look.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, it's.
And in a situation like that, so Phil, you grow apples, so you know about this. You never plant apples in the bottom of the hill. You plant it halfway down because the air in the spring and the fall, especially the spring, the air cools and you've got movement. But down in the valley, that's where it gets stagnant and colder. So you might be able to get your bees partway up your hill and then
Yeah, I
way
have a
down.
lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
I just, I need some professional eyes to look at it to,
Sure, yep.
give me a.
Yeah, kind of the edge of the timber there, that can be a challenging place to figure out where's the best spot. So we talked a little bit here about queen cells before class. So somebody explained to me why when you open up your hive and you find queen cells, what are some of the reasons why? What's going on that created that situation? Okay, so could it be that they know they needed to replace the queen? Yes, that's one scenario.
They always have one on deck, though, right, just in case.
So
Starting to-
the queen cups will always be there, but that's just really a wax cell with no egg or anything in it. They don't have a queen on backup, but the queen cups are really, really common. They just tend to build them on the bottoms of frames. So yeah, there are different situations that can lead to them raising a new queen. So one of them would be in an emergency, something happened to the other queen. Another one would be that they're getting ready to swarm because they ran out of room. Any idea how you tell the difference when you're looking at a queen cell, which one it is, supersedure or swarm? Okay, so a swarm cell is almost always on the bottom of the frame. Anybody remember why? So the queen ran out of room. Yeah, so they backfilled the brood nest with nectar. The queen ran out of room. She found one of those queen cups that you're talking about on the bottom of the frame, laid an egg in it, hatched into a larva, and the bees see that, and it's like, oh, we're raising queens. So if it's on the face of the comb, like on the edge of where the brood nest was, that's usually an emergency or a supersedure. And the situation there is they didn't run out of room. They figured out something's wrong with this queen. We need to raise a new one. They went and they looked for the larva that was the right age. Where's that going to be? On the outer edge of the brood nest that they're already working on. So you remember those pictures with capped honey in the center, capped brood in the center and honey out here. And remember that band in between where the slide said to pay attention to that area? That's where you find eggs and larvae. That's where the youngest brood is. So in an emergency situation, that's where they'll find one the right age to raise a queen from. So location of those queen cells can tell you what led to the situation. So yeah, nectar in the brood nest is step one of the swarm process. If they're bringing it in so fast that they're running out of places to put it, every time a cell hatches or a bee emerges out of a cell and a worker bee puts nectar in there, the queen can't lay in that cell anymore. So that's the very first step of the swarm process. And new beekeepers a lot of times will inspect the hive and figure out something's wrong, I don't have brood, but not notice the reason they don't have brood is because there's nectar in those cells. And until you know what you're looking for, once you've seen nectar in it and you move the frame around a little bit and you see a little glint of light off of the liquid in every cell, you'll know what you're looking at. But it's easy to miss when you're new and you just know there's something wrong, I don't have brood. So it's probably, if there's nectar in there, you don't have brood because they're out of space. If it's completely open, then there's probably something wrong with the queen. You need to look for the queen or maybe start making plans to replace the queen. So if you come across that situation and there is no queen or something happened to the queen, you need to get a new one. This is kind of important. If you let them raise a new queen, in most situations, they'll be capable of doing it. If there's enough bees left in there that they can keep a larva well fed, then they can raise a replacement queen. She can go out and get mated, but you need to look at the time. In particular, whoops, I added this, so I don't know if you saw it, so this got added fairly late. So if something happens to the queen here, there's some larvae in there that's already gone through the egg stage when the bees figure out, oh, we need to raise an emergency queen. So they start raising the emergency queen here. And the new queen doesn't start laying until day 25. Brood from the original queen is still hatching. If there's some in there, it's still emerging all the way up until day 22. How many days does it take for a bee to go from an egg to an emerged bee? Does anybody remember? 21, yep. So from here to here, there's 23 days, there's no emerging brood because the emergency queen is still going through the whole process of emerging herself and going out and getting mated, and it takes a while. So she starts laying on day 46, 45 or 46. So that's a big break in there with no new brood emerging. And that whole time, remember, there are bees dying. If they're only living 4 to 6 weeks, you could lose up to half of the bees in that 23 days with no emerging brood. So if it's a really strong hive and it's really early in the year, that may not be a big enough setback to worry about. If it's not a really strong hive or if it's late in the year, it may be better to find somebody who has a mated queen that you can put in there instead of waiting for them to raise a new one. And I know we talked a little bit about introducing a new queen. I still think that you want to leave the candy plug covered when you put the queen cage in there. Give the bees about 3 days to get used to her and then uncover it so they can eat the candy. You will hear a lot of beekeepers say they just take a marshmallow and they stick it in there and that's the candy cage or the candy plug. I don't think it takes bees very long to go through a marshmallow. I don't get that one. So I'd make sure they really can't get to her for 3 days at least until they get used to her. And I don't think I know how to detect it or how to see it, but you can take the cage out and you can take your finger and move the bees around. And by the way the bees are acting, you can tell if they've accepted the queen or not. I think that the best example I've heard explained is if the bees, if you can see their backs are arched, they're trying to chew on the cage, they're trying to get to her. If they're sticking their proboscis or their tongue through there and their back is flat, they're trying to feed her. But then the other thing is if you brush them away and they come off like Velcro, they're definitely not used to her and they're trying to attack her. So don't take the plug out and expose the candy yet. Any questions on swarming or any of that so far? Okay, making splits. We haven't really talked too much about making splits. I think the best way to go about it is to stumble upon a hive that's already got capped queen cells in it and do what I talked about earlier. One frame with one or however many capped queen cells are on it, all of the bees, and then another frame of honey and all of the bees. I would call that the bare minimum. When I do mating nukes raising queens, that's what I start out with, but it's usually because I've got so many queen cells, I don't have enough bees to take care of them. So that's the bare minimum. You probably want to feed them. You definitely have to keep a close eye on them. So you're just starting out. If you came into your hive and found a bunch of queen cells, you might want to give them a few more resources. So let's say 3 frames and the bees that are on them. And I'd say make 2 at least, maybe 3. If you want 2 new queens out of the deal, make at least 3, because if 25% of them get lost or a third of them get lost, you'll still end up with 2 good queens. Another theory or practice that you'll see a lot is a walkaway split. A walkaway split is the hive is doing really well. You want to make increases. You've got the equipment. You want more bees. So you literally, if you got 2 boxes, you literally walk up, take 1 box, put it on a new bottom board, put a new lid on it, and walk away from it. So the queen will end up in one of those 2 halves. The other half will be queenless and have to raise a new queen. It's a simple way of doing it. It's not the most efficient because you're only going to get 1 chance. The half of the bees that have to raise a new queen are going to put all of these resources into raising 6 or a dozen queen cells. 1 queen's going to emerge and destroy the others, and then she'll go out and hopefully get mated. You only end up with 1 queen out of it, but the bees put a lot of effort and a lot of resources into it. And not every queen makes it back from her first mating flight. Not every queen that gets mated actually turns out to be a good queen. I think that it's probably more than 50%, but it's not much more than 50%. So if you made 2 splits, or going to get 2 new queens, you're probably going to get 1 good one out of the 2. So a walkaway split isn't the most economic way of doing it. Another thing you can do, again, simple, do the walkaway split, and I'd have to look at a calendar, but you come back when the queen cell should be capped. And at that point, you start taking frames with capped queen cells and putting them in different places. So you may end up with, out of that half that raised a new queen, maybe you can end up with 3 queens or 3 attempts, and maybe you get two good ones. The other thing that you can do, you can find the queen in the original hive, take the original queen and some capped brood and some honey frames and some bees, move them into a new location. And then most of your bees are in the original location without a queen, and they'll raise better queens because there's a larger workforce. And the new queens will be fed better. And then the same thing, you go back that day when the queen cells are capped, and you start pulling out frames with capped queen cells, and you make some additional splits out of it. So that's fairly easy. You just had to go in and find the queen. You have to come back at the right time, and it's got the potential of getting more queens and better queens. One of the keys to raising quality queens is the bees that are feeding the larva. There needs to be plenty of bees. They need to have plenty of resources. So that's a better way of doing it, and it's still pretty easy. Probably not what you're going to do in your first year, but okay. So Any questions on requeening? Because I don't have any text on there. I need to get that filled out. Okay. Something that I don't think we talk enough about is if you find a hive that, let's say that it's just the bees are always angry, and obviously you wouldn't raise queens from a hive like that, but going a step further, you should requeen that. Even if it's something that, okay, they're not dangerous, they're just more grouchy than what I want to deal with. If you let a hive like that go, the drones are going out and they're mating with other bees, they're spreading those genetics. If you have a hive that, I don't know, it survives every year, but it never makes honey, replace that queen with a new queen. I don't think we focus enough on getting rid of the less desirable bees. If you've got a hive of bees that you need to treat it several times a year for mites while your other ones only need one mite treatment, replace the queen in that hive to get rid of those inferior genetics. I think that's something we need to stress more. Who's heard of laying workers? Nobody? We haven't talked about laying workers? Phil, I know you have. Okay. Okay, so the queen's the only bee in the hive that's been fed the right diet to fully develop ovaries. But the other worker bees are female and they can lay eggs. The pheromones of the queen usually suppress that. I don't know if it's an instinct or what do you want to call it, but the queen pheromones suppress the laying workers. I guess it's not uncommon to have a few laying workers even in a perfect hive. So once in a while you'll see one or you'll see 2 or 3 or 4 eggs in a cell once in a while. And a new queen will lay more than one in a cell once in a while. But the laying worker situation is the queen is gone, and somehow or another they have failed to raise a new queen, or the new queen came back and was a dud, and the queen pheromone isn't there, and a lot of workers will start laying. One misconception that you'll hear quite a bit is that there's one laying worker in there, and if you can find her and get rid of her, then you can save the hive. It's not one, it's lots. Another misconception is people will find 2 or 3 eggs in a few cells and they're convinced they've got a laying worker. When you have a laying worker, it's dozens of eggs in every cell. And then another thing is the queen can get the egg in the center. Laying workers can't. Their abdomen isn't as long, so it's usually more to the side of the cell. But in my experience, laying workers, it's been lots and lots of eggs and lots of cells. The dreaded fear of laying workers is it's really, really hard to get them to accept a queen. You put a queen in a cage in there and leave it for 6 days and take the candy cork off, and they'll eat the candy and they'll kill her. There's just something about laying workers that they think they've got a laying queen, or they think they've got things under control, and it's really hard to get them to accept a new queen. Probably, I haven't ever had to do this or help anybody, but the best advice I think is people will take that hive and shake all of the bees out onto the ground, out in the bee yard, and then put the frames back in the hive. The bees will crawl, some of them, probably most of them, back into their hives. Some of them will crawl into other hives. Something about that being totally destructed and torn apart and having to crawl back together, and you introduce a new queen in a cage at that same time, somehow that seems to be the saving grace, and they'll then accept a queen. So yeah, they can be a struggle. Luckily, I've never had to deal with one. So Phil talked quite a bit about checking for mites. There's a picture of mites in the little white styrofoam bowl that I use. Pour the alcohol in it, and it's really easy to see them in the white container. And there's a mite on my finger. I think we've talked about this. Yeah, I think that we've covered that enough. Any questions on the mites or any of that? So these, I told you last week that I work for Bee Informed Partnership. This is something that I saved before I started working for them, and these aren't available anymore. And we wish that we could make them available. Maybe someday we will, but I saved some of these from a few years back. But I thought this was kind of interesting, the amount of losses based on whether it's backyard or sideline or commercial. You would think the backyard beekeepers wouldn't do as well as the sideline, but there might not be that many people in the sample, so it might not be too good a slide.
Sideline beekeepers will do the backyard beekeepers.
They don't do that anymore. They don't use that classification, but I think it was sideline would have been less than 50 and more than, I'm not sure. 20.
More than 50, less
Is it?
than 200 or 500.
Oh, is that where it was?
Yeah.
So what they're doing now is just two classifications. It's backyard, which is up to 50, and commercial, which is 50 or more. So sideline was 250 or
Somewhere under 500.
under 500. Okay, I'd forgotten that.
It's where you're trying to generate more revenue than.
Or actually trying to generate revenue, but not necessarily trying to make a living off of it would be
Right.
kind of the sideline area.
Tax bracket.
No, probably not. Probably not.
Probation bracket.
So this one, it's probably not enough of a difference to be statistically significant, but you know, the zero mite treatment colonies definitely died off at a higher percentage than the colonies that were treated. Yeah, and there again, use Varroa treatment, did not use Varroa treatment. There's a big difference there. All right, so this I don't think is too big. Okay, so if you don't have a name tag, I brought name tags finally, and we're gonna move back to the tables back here. I'll go real quick through inspecting a colony with the demonstration hive back there. Have a seat back there, and from there on out, Phil's got some stuff to show everybody, and then we'll just have a conversation. You know, any questions you haven't had a chance to ask or anything that you're curious about.
Brought that book that I was telling you
Oh,
about
yeah.
last week.
Cool. Yeah, I want to check that out.
Right, breathing, it's always good. Everyone in the alive. That's right. So let your team captains.
Okay, there you go.
How many colleges did you go to
This year?
Yeah.
6.
So on the orchard, you mentioned, I think last week that they all died. Right? In South Sioux.
Oh, it's also, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
I
no,
don't think so.
no, someone besides Ron looking at that stuff then? They looked at them already?
Diane looked at him, and told Ron about that. We talked to Ron.
Yeah, I didn't know.
I don't know how many he had over there
I'm not sure.
going in. I was probably only 2 or 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I had a tentative date when he gets back from Arizona to go hang out with him and do the checkups.
There goes that idea.
Road trip to Beersford, yeah.
I will, yeah, I will. I got nothing but time.
I need a few more warm days, let's go down. all snow cover up there.
I just came back from the Black Hills just now,
Yeah.
so I was a little bit late, and
It's crazy.
the
that
amount
that's
of
where
snow
Billy
out
and
there.
Ben Just like,
Well, there's tons of snow out there in the hills though,
Yeah.
still,
Yeah.
tons.
All right, so as far as inspecting the beehive, I like to tell people you need to kind of work from 30,000 foot view, or like a lot of people, especially new beekeepers, you want to open this up and find the queen. So the kind of equivalent of that, think about you sleep in one morning, the rest of the family is gone when you wake up. You decide, oh, I'm just going to stay in bed and read a magazine. You turn the light on, and the light doesn't come on. You call the power company right away, or do you look and see, well, was the clock in the room on? And if the clock in the room isn't on, you go downstairs and you see, is it just the bedroom or are there other rooms? And when it's not your house, you look across the street at the neighbors, try and figure out if the neighbors have electricity. Once you've gone through all of those steps and no one has electricity, then you call the power department and see what's going on. So there's those are obvious levels that we get because we've grown up with electricity and we've gone through it. You haven't grown up with a beehive, you haven't been in a beehive before, so you need to realize that there's different things that you can look at. So the first thing you can do is just look at the entrance and watch the bees coming and going. It takes some time to get the experience, but you can figure out sometimes by looking at the entrance, things. You get two hives, you've got some comparison. If there's a lot of activity at one entrance and no activity or very little at the other, you know that there's something not right with that one that doesn't have a lot of activity. Could be circumstances, like last week or 2 weeks ago, we had a warm day and I had one hive that wasn't flying and I thought, oh, they're dead. I opened it up, there's just not as many bees in it and they weren't warmed up like the other hive. So that can happen too. So obviously, first thing is you want to take the top cover off. You usually want a brick, a rock, something on here to keep the wind from blowing it off. And in the wintertime, I put a ratchet strap around it. And Menards, you can get 4 or 5 ratchet straps for $10. It's pretty cheap to keep the lid on in the winter. And if the whole hive did blow over in the winter and you've got one of those straps on, if it stays together, there's a good chance that the hive will survive. If it tips over and the lid comes off, it's going to be gone unless you're there like right away. But as far as inspecting the hive, take whatever off the top. This will usually come off pretty easily, but sometimes it'll be stuck. You might need to use your hive tool. And then lean it up against the hive. It's probably just going to be in your way a little bit. Put it on the ground.
I have a question. Would you really do it from the other side though?
Yeah, because I'm in front of the entrance, so yeah, you would
Okay.
tend to do it from the back or the side.
I wondered who was gonna come up with that one.
That is one
I've been waiting to say
disadvantage. That's a good one.
something.
That is one disadvantage to getting them all in a row, because then you can only inspect from the back or the front and not the side. Or set up where you can have 2 together, at least you can get on the side or the back. Yeah. And another thing is pay attention in bee class, even when or bee meetings, even when you've been a beekeeper for a while. I learned something from Phil Westra last week when he said, you stick the hive tool in the corner and pry up and that pops up and it makes a noise and it ticks the bees off. He said, just put your hand on it. When you pry it up, it doesn't make that noise. I didn't know that. No one has ever pointed that out to me before. So what I always tell people is have the hive tool in this hand and the smoker in this hand, so that when it pops off of there, you can puff some smoke under it right away. So now I'm still gonna have the smoker in my hand, but I'm gonna put my hand on top of the smoker, pry that up, and then you want to put a couple of puffs of smoke under it, set it down, and 30 seconds to a minute, let the smoke have a chance to take effect or to have an effect. The other thing I usually do and tell people to do is open that inner cover away from you. If the bees do come boiling out, at least the opening is that way instead of facing right at you. You normally wouldn't have there. And you can start, like I said, you're inspecting from 30,000 feet. You can start by looking at how are the bees on the lid acting. A lot of times you'll see bees really twitchy and jerky on the lid, and they'll be acting the same way down their frames too. There. The next thing is how many bees are across the top of the frames. You know, are there only bees on these two, or are the bees all the way out here? It takes a while to get a feel for what's a small colony, what's a big colony. And it'll help if you can get into somebody else's hives and watch them inspect and get an idea of, you know, how yours compares to someone else's. If you see a lot of bees lined up on all the frames and they're all looking at you, they're paying attention to you, and a puff of smoke sometimes is enough to send them back on their way and back to their business. If they're looking at you and paying attention to you, they might think that you're a threat. And you know, you'd be surprised, a puff of smoke over the top and you'll hear the buzz increases, and then they just all kind of go do whatever. I usually recommend that you move this frame over, or this one. And if you can, get your hive tool in there, move those over and pull this out instead of the outer or one of the center ones. So you make yourself some space, because when this is covered with bees and the wax is all drawn out, there's not a whole lot of space in between the two. Because of the way these end bars run up against each other and create the space in between the frames, there's more space in between these two than there is this one and the wall. That's why I don't like pulling this one out first. If everything is packed in there tight, sometimes they really, really are tight. You can't get a whole lot of movement this way. You pull that one out first, there's just not as much space for the bees over here to be protected. The other thing is they will usually put bird comb around the outside, and you know it's going to stick out like that. And as you pull the frame up, that bird comb is going to run into the bees and rough them up. The other reason why you want to take one of these two frames out as opposed to something in the center, there's a lot less chance the queen's going to be on that frame. You know, this blue tape is representing where the queen usually lays, but if this was the bottom box and this was a really full hive, she'll probably lay all the way out here. So she can be on these frames, but it's less likely, and especially up top. So you pull the frame out, you're up in the upper box. At this point, you're probably looking for honey, or you're looking to see if they've drawn the wax out, or you're looking for open nectar. So that's, you know, a level way up here. If you just pull these full frames out and they're all capped with honey, that's giving you quite a bit of information already. If there are two boxes on this hive and those two are capped with honey, most likely these are all full of brood and honey too. So I mean, you know something right now, this hive is doing pretty well. If you're in a hurry, you could pop this up, and from down here, you can get a good view in between the frames. You can see that it's full of bees. You can probably see it's brood. You can get an idea how many are on top here, and you might be done at this point. That's all I need to know. It's full of bees and brood, and this is full of honey. I need to go get a honey soup and put on this. You don't need to go any further than that. If you don't find honey in here, then you need to start looking on these frames. What's going on? Are these drawn out? Are they full of brood? Are they not drawn out? Okay.
Is there ever a time like you were talking where everything's full and you're gonna add a honey super? Would you ever move any of those full honey frames up top, or input empties down in that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm trying to say there's several different situations or scenarios. The first thing to think about is if you put a honey super on and it's a medium, you can't pull a deep frame up into it.
Yeah.
But if some people do put deeps on for supers, and if you came across this and you thought, okay, I pulled the brood frames out and there's eggs and larvae and they haven't started to backfill with nectar yet, but there's no place for them to put any honey, no place for them to put any nectar. So they haven't started the swarm process yet, but you know that's the next, tomorrow they're going to. Then, yes, you may want to
Move some.
maybe pull some capped honey out and put a foundationless frame in the middle of the brood nest, or a foundation frame in the middle of the brood nest. So, you know, if you don't have other equipment, you're not planning on making a split. I've seen people do that, take a couple of frames of honey out. You put it in the freezer, you don't have to harvest it. You could give it to a hive later if it needs it. But the other key thing there is, let's say that this is my brood nest. Let's say they're all drawn out. All of these blue frames are drawn out with brood. You're afraid that this is going to swarm. If you've got a foundationless frame, put it right in the center. So there's a lot of bees in here, right? Because they're doing so well. They're going to start drawing that foundation out right away. As soon as they draw it out just a little bit, the queen's going to lay an egg in it. Before they could store any nectar in it, the queen can lay it, and she will. And that, now all of a sudden the queen's got a place to lay. She's not going to go lay in swarm cells. So you bought yourself some time. If they were really, really full, you'd probably want to do two. Yeah.
One
Yeah.
of the combinations to do, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So, and then the other thing is, I run all 8-frame mediums. So when I put a new box on, if I can, instead of putting a new box, a new empty box or drawn frame, whatever it is, instead of putting it on top, I'll put it one box down. Because that way the bees are working on boxes on either side, and they'll work on the one in between as well. And you may find, you might trick bees into getting into your honey super that way. If you put a honey super on top of this, sometimes they'll ignore it. It's all, you know, plastic with a little bit of wax on it. They don't see that as their home necessarily. But if you put it in between these two boxes, now they have to go up and down. Maybe they'll start working on it. I wouldn't do it for very long because the queen's going to lay in it. But you might do it for a day or two and then put it on top. Or the other thing is, put it on top. Hopefully they start working it. When they do, then you put the queen excluder on. So did that answer your questions? Of when you might do that? Yeah. And another thing to think about is, when you're putting the hive back together, this is your bottom box and this was your brood nest and it's cold out, you don't want to do that. You just split the brood nest in half, and as many bees as it takes to fill the space between two drawn frames, it takes way more bees to fill the space between a frame that's not drawn. And they still have to keep all of the brood warm. So you don't want to accidentally or intentionally do that when it's still getting cold out. And when I say cold, I'm talking probably below 40 at night, maybe below 45. They keep the brood nest at 94, 98.
Around 97 if they've got
97.
active brood.
Yeah, so they keep the brood around 97 degrees. So it's a lot of resources to keep that warm if you accidentally put some extra space in there.
Does anyone put a thermometer in there?
Yeah,
Like,
I
do
have.
you
Yeah.
keep track?
For
Saying
couple
like those
years.
solar ones, you can see it from your house, you know?
You've seen those hive monitoring, they monitor the buzz of the.
There's a lot of different things they're doing now, but
Yeah.
like temperature, humidity, some of them are doing sound.
To your phone.
Yeah, I've got an app on my phone.
Yeah,
It's still kind of experimental, but they say they can tell from the sound if it's getting ready to swarm or if it
Yeah.
has mites or.
Different things.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
so
all
it's
kinds of
crazy.
stuff. Yeah. So getting back to going through your inspection,
It's your own voice.
you know, take a look at how much capped honey is in there, okay? The next thing that you're gonna wanna look for or look at is capped brood. You know, is it patch this big? Is it patch this big? And then how many frames of capped brood? Okay, if you're not finding capped brood or you're not finding enough capped brood, then you're probably gonna wanna start looking for larvae and eggs. And eggs are hard to see. A trick to finding eggs is put the sun at your back and tip the frame until the sun is shining down into the bottom of the cells, because that's where the eggs are, it's at the bottom. So if you can get the sunlight, and it's depending on the time of day, it can be hard to do. But that really helps to see eggs. Or the flashlight on your cell phone is pretty helpful for finding them too. The other thing is the camera on your cell phone is good for finding all kinds of stuff. Take a picture and then zoom in You might not be able to find it with your naked eye, but you take a couple pictures and then, oh, there are eggs or there's larvae. Yeah, that's a good one too. So you're not finding enough honey, you're not finding enough capped brood. Now you're looking for larvae, and you find, okay, there's plenty of larvae. It's shiny, healthy, well fed. Well, looks like the queen is there and things are going. It's just for some reason they had a setback. Maybe you can tell, you can get a feel for things, but you have to go through the different levels. Where you get down to the point where you can't find larvae, you can't find eggs, well, now it's time to start looking for the queen. And that's the equivalent of calling the power company. Something's definitely wrong here. You checked everything that makes sense, and then you want to try and find the queen. And even whether you find her or not, if there's no eggs and there's no larvae, and it's the time of year where there should be plenty of both, it's probably time to look for a replacement queen. Trying to think. The only other thing I haven't mentioned, if you're watching the entrance and the bees are bringing in pollen, most likely they're raising brood or getting ready to raise brood. They usually don't bring pollen in if there isn't any food to feed. They store some pollen, but they don't really backlog pollen. So they're probably raising brood. If you catch a swarm and you don't want to disturb them because that might be something that makes them fly away, you watch the entrance for a while. When you see the bees start bringing in pollen, it means there's a queen in that swarm and she's laying and they're getting ready to raise brood. So the other thing is when you take a box off, and it goes for the frames too, and I didn't figure this out on my own. I watched a YouTube video. If you're just pulling the frame up like this, they stick them down really good. That puts all of the stress on your lower back. If you put your fingers on the frames alongside of it, you'd be surprised the leverage you get. You probably have used your hive tool to get it loose anyway. And the same thing goes for picking the box up. Put an elbow on your knee. Put the weight on your knee, not so much on your back. And you'll see people say you want to set it on the lid. That keeps, there are going to be bees on the underside of that. That keeps some of them off the ground. Less chances to crush them. I think, go like that, maybe not. If you end up with one side on the lid, you're going to crush a lot of bees. So I guess that's why we usually do a diagonal. There's a fewer contact points.
I sometimes stand mine up on end too.
Yeah.
Depending on what I'm doing. And if I haven't broken anything loose yet, I know everything's gonna stay, I'll stay up and end and work on that one first.
Particularly the supers.
Yeah.
Yeah, the honey supers.
You gotta get it, you gotta take two of those off to get to the box.
Yep. Stand up.
It doesn't hurt to stand them up on end because they, more than likely, the frames are stuck in them.
These, stuck together, they're rattling pretty bad. But yeah, anything that's had bees in it for a while, those won't move. They're standing up like that. They're fine.
The other factor is, there's only one person in this room that can lift that box if it's full of honey.
It's not me.
It's not me. I
There-
bet he's the only one.
Yeah, I can still.
Can you?
Yeah. still.
Okay.
I can still. The other thing is when you go to put this box on, there's a lot of different theories there, but the underside of these frames are gonna have bees on it, and they have burr comb on it, and these frames have burr comb on it, anything like dragging it across, there's a lot of variation, you're gonna rough up a lot of bees. Queen has
That's what
to
he's
be up.
talking about.
Yeah, that's only a lot thicker.
Yep, a lot thicker.
So I think the best theory is to, see what I'm doing, put one corner down. So at least, you're only making contact in one place. And if you shake this as you gradually lower it, instead of just smashing or squeezing, that little bit of movement, the bees get brushed instead of crushed. And when they get brushed, they move out of the way. And so you just gradually shake it.
And you can did you mention putting some smoke in there first?
Yeah, I didn't mention it. You can smoke if there's a lot of bees on the frame or on the edges. Yes, you can hit them with smoke, and a lot of times that'll make them move down in too. And yeah, you should get in the habit of smoking them down to give yourself some room. So I'll
John,
put
you
this
used
back
to,
together.
you used a great analogy once about smoke and being at a rock concert. I don't think you've said that here, have you?
I might have, yeah, so it's like, smoke, a lot of times you'll hear that the smoke makes them think there's a forest fire, so they go and load up on food, and then they're lethargic. I don't think that's necessarily it, it's that they communicate with pheromones, and the smoke interferes. So yeah, it'd be like us going to a rock concert, trying to have a conversation. I kind of know what you're saying, but I can't really hear you. So if you're yelling, hey, this guy over here is trying to steal our honey, I'm not gonna figure it out so much as if we didn't have the rock.
Sounds
concert.
good.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure, I'll have another one too.
But it depends on the kind of smoke.
Yeah, I was
All right, so Phil, I think you had some stuff.
Okay, yeah, I brought all kinds of interesting things. I know when Dean was talking about getting bees off of there, I'll take this from the blower, the bee brush, the whatever. We started with a bee brush, so let's say that this was honey, and we're not trying to get the bees off. Yeah, this is great for maybe 4 or 5 times. What happens to your bee brush? It gets
a little
it gets
together.
sticky, and it gets tough. So this is now you can pass around. It's been washed a few times. It only gets used when we're harvesting honey and we've got everything already in the honey house, and you pull one out and there's 2 or 3 bees that are still going, I'm not leaving, but I don't know where I am. You can just give them a quick brush and it doesn't matter. Thank you. So I like having a couple of them around, but we don't use a lot in the yard. Do you use them much, Dave?
I tend not to, but my wife uses it all the time. She likes to get every bee off of the hive before we put the.
I think Donna used to be that way, and now Donna's just like, oh, come here, sweetheart. You know, so we got that going on. We also talked about spacing for a super. So when you're in a deep and you've got brood, 10 frames. But if you've got that super for honey, there's a benefit to having 9 frames because they will draw that out even farther. So now when you're cutting that capping off of there, it's out farther. It's a lot easier to take care of. And this is one of those simple little tools of you just get it worked around and then you can go back and forth and it spreads those 9 frames out evenly. If we're from experience, you could do this at the bee house and then take your supers out in the back of your truck and put them on there and they're not in the same place. So we just do it quickly there. I think Phil Wester talked about having 2. Just start in the middle and go 2 directions.
So go ahead and do that once on those, because those should move way easier than.
I know how to
once
do it.
they're stuck
Oh, you
together.
want me to? Heck, yeah, I know how to do it. Look at somebody else. So get us spread a little bit, and then you just want a frame, between each one of the little points, and then you just like slide it across.
Okay. So you don't have to use your hive tool even on frames that have been in a hive a few times?
Well, I only do this when I put a super on for the first time.
Okay.
So they're all loose already, because we've
Okay.
pulled them all over the winter. So I'm
Gotcha.
setting super, and once it's on there, we don't mess with it again until
Okay.
it's time to harvest.
Can anybody tell that I don't have one of those?
Yeah, jump up and try it. This is a hands-on, this is get involved. But yeah, it's pretty handy. There are also, let's see, that's a 9 frame. There's also 8 frames. We haven't tried that. That seems like a lot of,
That's a
a
lot of
lot of
space.
wax, a lot of energy to pull out.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah, we want to give it a try.
Yeah, the reason that you want to use this really is important is that if those are staggered in an uneven spacing, they will start to stick them together.
Uh-huh.
If they're really wide and the next one over is close, they'll stick those, they'll put the comb right between them. And then you'll have a big mess.
Well, and if you've got 10 frames in there, then it wouldn't do that. But with
True.
9 frames in there, it's way easier for them to get
Yep.
out of whack like that.
And I'm gonna add this, we only use this on frames that already have drawn comb. We only go 9. So if I'm putting a brand new super on it, it's all like this with foundation, I don't put 9 in, because now there's just too much space. This was like Phil Wester was saying, get it as best you can, get it squared up to the middle. Once they start to go on that one, then I have no problem coming in, taking one, popping, doing that. Yeah, spread it out a little bit.
I only thought I've had every disaster. There are yet disasters yet to be had. There's my operation, I'm sure.
There's always a disaster to be had. Let's talk about this one real quick. We'll pass both of these around. This is for workers and potentially for, this is for drone. So look at the two cell sizes on them as well. And as far as I know, the drones always come in just the green plastic. I don't think I've ever seen. Have you, John, purchased?
I've seen some pink frames, but I don't know what the cell size is on
Yeah.
them. But yeah, the green is usually the drone. Yeah.
Yep. And again, what was Phil Westford telling us about the advantage of maybe putting those into our colonies, into our houses?
Might thing.
Mites, yeah. But do you have to be on top of it? There's about checking that, yeah, because if you're not, those all hatch. That's a hard recovery right there.
Well, and the reason he's saying that, and we maybe didn't talk about that a whole lot, is Varroa preferred drone. And
Because they have a longer.
they have a longer cycle, and so there's a couple more days before the drone emerge. That's a couple more days for that foundress mite to lay a couple more eggs
That's right.
and more Varroa to mature before it gets uncapped. Once the cell is uncapped, the Varroa that are not mature under those cappings, they die, or at least they're not sexually mature. We don't have to worry about them. So yeah, if you missed that and you've got that much extra drone brood in your hive, then you've got that many extra mites in your hive. Yeah.
John also talked a little bit about putting a box in there where you put it to try to draw the ladies up so that they will work on it. And one of the things that we have now started to do is use some of our own wax to repaint these. So if you felt these have wax on them. There's not very much there. It's pretty minimal. And then if you do something kind of fun, but maybe a little silly, is use black foundation, which makes it easier to see eggs, but you're not paying attention and you're working in the bee yard and the sunlight hits them, they heat up so fast and your wax runs off and you, yeah, that's happened to me. And I didn't pay much attention to, I saw one, I set aside, but I didn't think about others. And later when I went and pulled out, they had drawn wax like this because that's where the melt went. And it was useless. So yeah, so just those little bitty paint rollers that you can get, we melted. Mom was so kind to donate one of her 7 church crock pots for me to put my melted wax in. It works, and you don't have to roll back and forth. It's just down, flip, down.
Oh, cool.
And I mean, it's super quick. It does not take much.
Just a stripe on there is all it
Yeah,
takes.
it doesn't really take very much to get them to say, oh, okay. The other piece of that is they smell that. And I don't know necessarily the origin of that wax. I know the origin of this wax right here. Where'd I get this wax?
Out of your hives.
From mine, okay? And I'm gonna pass this around, but here's what I want you to think about. A honeybee, when she's able to produce wax, and that's only during flow in the summertime, she at best produces 8 wax scales per day. That's not very many. It's 800,000 wax scales to make 1 pound of wax. This is roughly 2.5 million wax scales right here. So when you talk about the value of wax and having drawn comb, think about the resources it takes for that bee.
I don't remember what it is, but it's so many pounds of sugar syrup to make so many pounds of wax.
Feels so healthy. Yeah.
Well, and think of how many frames that, this amount of wax could make, because, the bees have evolved to where like the bare minimum amount of wax goes into making those cells, yet it's the strongest structure that they could have used.
And this is just the cappings from our honey. So the other stuff, the Burko, I'll get to this more, but just, I brought that in because I just want you to think about how much energy it takes. It's pretty cool. We look at that and go, yeah, well, it's like the bees, 8 scales a day. If you've seen a scale, they're like that big.
They're tiny.
They are super tiny. So we've got that going on. And that goes to, why do you want to feed? You have bees already, right? And you guys have bees?
We did.
Past
Don't
tense?
anymore.
Okay.
We're getting more.
And you don't yet, but you're getting them? All right. So as you get going into spring, especially if you've got a nuke or if you're going package bees, feed. And that's something I did not know. I think we may be talking about how we got started a little bit later. I started with bad intel, and you can predict my results. Zero survival. And that's where I started learning, and I fortunately got to meet these guys along the way and get going. It's like, oh, this is fantastic. You got some things figured out. Before that feeding, in the spring especially, you want to go to a 1-to-1. And I read this really great article in American Bee Journal. If you don't subscribe to it yet, I recommend it. Yeah, there was gonna be articles that are way over your head. There's still some over my head. I could read Randy Allen several times to get it. But there's also really good levels. And one of the authors of there said, don't stress too much about, do you have the exact 1-to-1? Find me a flower. That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. So they will use what you give them until they find a better resource, which is exactly what you want. For me, I use something like this from our winery, and it's got little, it's hard to see, little gallons along the side. And all I do is I just stick this in the sink, hot water, up to, I go just a little over a gallon, and then I put a 10-pound bag of sugar in there, shake it up, and off we go. Now, do I already have several of these because we have a commercial winery? Yeah, so that was a bonus for me. But I think you can find something like this. We have some that are 5 gallons, so after I make it in here, we just dump these into our 5-gallon totes. They all fit in the back of the truck and off we go. But that's me just as somebody who's only got 20 colonies. If you had hundreds, this is probably not your best plan. Right? You can see them out there with the big cubes in the back of the truck.
So you mentioned American Bee Journal. There's
Yes.
also Bee Culture magazine.
Yes.
And then Bee Culture magazine has a special magazine called Beekeeping Your First 3 Years.
It does,
You
that's
can
right.
subscribe to it forever, but it's geared towards new beekeepers, which I'd highly recommend that.
What's it called again?
Beekeeping Your First 3 Years. And it's a Bee Culture magazine publication.
I think you can, I know you can get it digital. Can you get it printed copy as well?
I think so.
Is it both?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. And American Bee Journal, they're one of their first articles is always designed for the first year people. And in fact, there's now a 4-part series for the best level on queen rearing. Have you seen that?
No.
The second article already. I did bring a copy for the February if you want to take a look at it. Or the March, excuse me, if you want to take a look at it, I'll pull that out. Okay, so feeding your bees. Here we go. I told John, I've never purchased one of these. I won this as a door prize and thought, are you serious? What are we gonna do with that stupid thing? And then I thought, oh yeah, bring it to bee class. You know what it is?
Outside bee feeder.
Uh-huh,
Feeder that hangs out front.
a boardman feeder, yep. And so what you do is you put your syrup in here. I'll pass it around, it's got little holes, put it right there. The bees crawl in and they eat that syrup. Brilliant, right?
Except the other ones come.
Except that
Then you get robbing.
it goes right there. That sits right there. And is that an invitation for a stronger colony to come in and rob?
If you had an
Absolutely.
exit or an entrance thing, so that it was small, would it still be a problem? Like, the
Could potentially still be a problem.
There's another problem.
There's other
Yeah.
problems. Here it
Could you
is.
ask this,
Raccoon.
could you set that with another super on top above it?
You're reading my mind. I like that. Yeah, absolutely could. So before we get there, this is now sitting outside. So what's its temperature control?
0.
Whatever the outside is, right? So if it's cold in the morning, are the bees coming down there? No. But if your bees are all clustered here, are they gonna go there to get feed, break cluster? Depending on temperature, probably not. Here's the next part, fermentation. You've got this nice warm day, the sun is shining there. What does sugar water do?
Expand first.
Expand,
It does
and then
expand.
ferment.
So yeah, you got a chance of breaking
I
that.
can always tell when the hummingbirds are drunk.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, this stuff's been, our master friend too.
raccoon?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Skunks like them too. Okay, so if you've got them and you want to use them, I'm not gonna tell you not to. But what you were just saying is if you had one or more of these and you wanted to set them there and then put another box on it, yeah, you certainly can.
Yep.
Here's something to think about, more equipment.
Because didn't you even
Right.
mention using a mason jar?
Yep.
Like with the holes in.
You,
and set
you
it up
could
there.
just set the mason jar with the holes in it
Yeah,
right
just
on top of
like
the
that
frames.
too.
But if you've got the little entrance thing, that gets it up in the air so the bees can
Good
get under it
idea.
and get more access.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that way they won't also be inclined to like, well, hey, this is nice, let's stick this baby on here tight so it doesn't move around.
Is there ever a situation where you would put that somewhere out in your garden, like, away from your beehives? And that's,
No,
yeah, I mean, that's.
I can't think of a situation.
No, that is open
Only for
feeding.
raising wasps.
Open feeding. Yeah.
Join the feed the yellow jackets. Go ahead.
Yeah, open feeding can set off robbing, and
It can.
it also can get your bees really, really interested in everything at your neighbor's house when it runs out too, so.
Yeah. And to me, if that's the concept you want to take, then I've never done this. I know Phil Wester uses these, the 2-gallon buckets or the 1-gallon paint buckets. And then you just can put, I think you can fit 4 1-gallon paint buckets in there. Of course, not actual paint buckets, but of that design.
We've
Then
got
you
some
can
of
use
the
them.
buckets,
We
and
use
they
those.
work, they work.
Yeah, they
good.
work well if you use, I've never used.
Just have holes in the bottom of them, like
Yeah.
you do with that.
Yep,
Is it, I've never had one and looked at the hole in the center of it. Is it like a special?
no, it's just
Just a
got
small
like,
hole.
I think it's probably got
With the poles.
So I
35
saw
or 40
plans
holes around, but they're really
For
small.
that type,
Okay.
making that type.
Because if you made it
and
big,
then
it would just run right out.
Right, but the dribble just kind of hang on there, so you
Yeah.
gotta take it right
Like
off.
a little piece of
Okay.
wood.
Like a little piece of lattice or something.
That, yeah, and then you drill holes in it, and it fills up that whole space, and then just sit on top of it and go through the.
Yeah,
I think it was-
yeah, you're the butt coming, don't you? This is a frame feeder, which you would just right in there, and it's pretty handy. You
They
can
drowned
fill,
in that.
you can fill it up,
Yeah.
You also now have to take the lid off and expose to all the bees, so you may want to smoke. So if you're in a hurry and it's like dusk, or it's cloudy, or it's rainy, they're not gonna be happy with you being there. I use these in my nukes and leave them there permanently. So there's one in there, but I'm gonna pass that around. What I want you to do is feel the inside of that thing. It's ribbed. And the concept is, oh good, the bees will get in there and they'll climb up that rib side and they'll be just fine. And what really happens in real life, they drown and you get this cake of dead bees.
You could probably put like chicken wire in there around.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
what
they
mine
would be able to
have.
find-
We have better luck cutting the flat board.
Yeah,
How's
see,
that
that's
board
what
go
I
up?
was, like a little
Sounds
house of
work.
board. They drill
Good
holes
idea.
in it.
Mhm.
Like with like a little, probably a 16th, 1/16 drill bit,
Yep.
whole bunch of little holes, and they, I don't know if they feed through the holes.
The issue becomes with those things, that things warp so
Yep.
bad.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
get
they do.
a couple of seasons and they just warp out of shape.
Do work. And you can buy spacers for them. Dayton sells little plastic spacers you can clip in there to keep it from bowing out. My experience has been with an open one like this, even with the board in it, is sometimes the board will stick. Or sometimes it
Yeah.
gets stuck part way, and then I still get drowned bees.
Usually they're hot and they shrivel up like that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they started to form.
Uh-huh. I've also experienced open it up and the bees have said, this is a great place to start building ridge comb. And now you've got all of this in there, and then you're looking and going, shoot, there's cat brood in there. And if I start digging, is my queen gonna be in there? You know?
Yeah.
So you've got this, Fleet Farm sells one that I thought, well, look at that. It's capped right here, and it goes in at an angle with a little bit of ladder, so when you pour it in, this part of the syrup right here, the bees can eat, but they can't have contact with. And I thought, brilliant. So I bought those. Yeah, I still have drowned bees, but now a thicker cap right here that I have to dig out. So you got this open and you're digging it out. It's like, all right. I was talking with a friend of mine, Matt Lance, and he said, try this. And they're a little expensive, so I only bought, more things to buy, right? I only bought 4 to try them out. But the concept is, now your bees can't necessarily get in there. You've got this tube that you can put on each side. You can pour your syrup in this way, and then you can pull these tubes up to dump your bees and go.
Oh,
And I went, oh, that's pretty good. I will give you the report next year
sure.
on how well it works.
You dump
They
all-
were not cheap.
You dump all the ground bees out.
Yeah, so you can pull that out, and then he uses that same concept to mountain feed, or mountain camp feed, which means he just pours straight sugar in there, just dry granulated sugar in the wintertime.
Mm.
And then when it's time for syrup again, he adds his 1-to-1 syrup and just lets it gradually mix and they work it up.
Build it in 2 minutes.
I know that's kind of what I'm thinking over here.
What do you think?
What would you
Just
use
the-
for the tubes?
I could come up with
You
something.
can come up with something.
I like,
Is this just
you
a
know
one
what was
line?
really good is like a piece of copper tubing, cap the bottom of it,
Yeah.
and drill some holes in it,
They come up with a top feeder.
or even PVC.
I
That's
saw-
the problem.
Probably
I've got something
PVC.
better.
PVC with some holes in it.
But copper has like antibacterial.
Yeah.
What is it poisonous to weed?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Good question.
The other
So-
point is that when you're feeding it, the one-to-one sugar, they will eventually stop eating.
It will.
That's,
Something better.
that's when it's time to just take it off, because they've got nutrients coming from other sources.
And if you're ready for honey production, you've got to stop eating. Well, ethically,
Ethically.
you got to stop eating.
Yeah, because they will put
Those are local
sugar syrup in the honey
Oh,
syrup if you're still feeding them. So
Yeah.
now you're eating and selling honey that's made out of sugar instead
Yeah.
of nectar. Yeah.
Which if it doesn't bother you, okay, but if you're selling it as honey. All right, so now you've got all that concept, right? I only use these in my nukes because it is a pain in my productions. What I like to do is have one of these that fits right on top. The bees can come in from underneath to feed. So this is right here. So if I've got a whole bunch of feeding to do I need my smoker? Nope. Do I need a veil? Me? Nope. Because I'm behind, popping that cover off of there, nobody's even paying attention to me. Are there bees all right here? Yeah, absolutely. Pour on each side, depending on drought, I sometimes put just water on one side and syrup on the other side. Same for winter, when it's a 2-to-1, pour it in here. You will also find out quickly how level your column, your hive is. Because all your syrup goes to that corner, and I'm gonna have to do a shift work right here to get this built up. This one is called a Miller feeder, and it is by far my favorite. This is all we
One
use.
note, and only one note, those crazy screens, you have got to get them on there correctly.
Oh, yes.
You have to take patience and time to make sure those are on there.
Or buy one
One
every day.
small hole and they will find it.
They will.
And that thing will be full of bees.
And they will, they'll drown, it'll be a problem.
Ugh.
But this is by far my favorite, just because of the two different sides,
Yeah.
bees can't get out.
I use those in the fall particularly and float styrofoam in there just in case.
Yep, just in case. Speaking of styrofoam, this is the first feeder that we ever used. And those fit on top as well. And as you see, they're made out of styrofoam, they work pretty well, they hold up pretty well. I painted them just because I read if you paint the outside, not the inside, the outside, you do pretty good. Or they last long. It's got this little part right here that fits in. The bees come up here, come down this side and eat. The difficulty is, at start, this part right here where the bees crawl down is not very, how do I wanna say it, not rough enough for them to hold on very well. So you've either gotta rough it up a little bit, or else they'll fall in there and still drown down in here. But the nice part again is, they can't get to you. The hard part, as you see, I'll pass around, is they will build vertical, and they will propolis that piece down. If you gotta clean it, what a pain. The other part, that black plastic is so easy to clean when you're done. It's all the black that's on this mold. And that's even after a bleach and an OxyClean wash, and then heavy duty rinse. Once that mold is in that styrofoam, it doesn't come out. Now, I haven't seen any negative effects on the bees when they're eating, but these are just my backups in case I'm in a situation.
Even the black mold in the sugar, water feeders, the round ones, I've read and heard that it doesn't bother the bees. It looks ugly when you look at it, but,
Yeah,
and I've panicked over it, but
they're
not a
they're
problem.
amazing, they're
Yeah.
pretty hardy. So yeah, we have a few of those just on backup. Now, I bought this one because I thought it looks cool. Actually, I bought two of them. This is my opinion, don't waste your money. Here's the reason why. If you look at how big
Oh, wow.
that hole is,
Mhm.
what has happened, as you can already see, the cone that's in there, and I'll just pass it around. The concept is the bees, of course, will come up, and they're under this dome, and if you need to clean it out, you pull this thing off. Well, when you pull that off, where are your bees?
Yeah,
They're coming out, all over, there's no smoke or tail.
or it goes empty.
Or it goes empty. Or for some reason, it got sticky and it stuck to your inner cover, and you go like this, and you're going,
Oh.
ah!
Yeah, that shouldn't be tall enough to
We,
stick to
no,
me.
we have bought
Yeah.
that, and when we lifted it up, the bottom was full of comb.
Yeah.
So Mike's holding it up.
Just like
and I-
that.
Just
and-
like this.
And I'm trying to clean it up, but it was really
Massive,
thick.
yeah.
It was thick.
And once again, is my queen.
Yeah.
You know, because I can see there's brood in there. I can't really see enough to know, is she there?
Yeah.
So I don't use these anymore. We've got two of them, they're sitting on the racks at home. I suppose if I'm ever in a pinch, but I've got to have a feeder immediately, I don't use it.
really good.
The one that I showed pictures of, when we're talking about equipment, it's all wood, and the bees can come up in the center. I like the wooden floats. I don't hardly get any drowned bees in there.
Yeah.
But I have to have a hat veil on when I go to refill it, because they're all exposed to the top when I take the lid off.
And that's like Dave said, as long as your screen on the Miller feeder is on properly, and we haven't had any difficulties yet, that's by far my favorite. It is so easy to work with.
I was just mentioning it because it comes in pieces. It comes.
You can buy the
it's
symbol
not-
or apart.
Not on.
Yeah.
From David, it's not on.
Amazon.
Track for the-
Yeah.
the site.
I bought mine, this one, I get these through Man Lake. I haven't seen Dayton sell these lately. Okay, maybe did originally. Dayton sells those and the wooden ones.
Yeah.
Manly.
Yeah, Man Lake.
Yeah, that too. If you sign up for, emails, you'll be blessed with numerous emails.
Oh, yeah. I'm only here for 47 minutes. No, it's not quite that bad. but-
Did you know that they have nucleuses and packages for sale?
What?
I don't know if you did or not, but they're like,
Yeah,
cheap
they're
prices
now,
for
right?
2022.
Yeah,
Order now.
Anyway, there's a whole bunch of information about feeders. Again, I use a variety. I think everybody finds the one they like the most and go with it. Questions? I fired a ton of info at you.
So what's the best way to get the bees off the frame right before you are going to extract honey? Because we used the brush,
Mhm.
that was horrible.
We did that to our first year. It was terrible.
They got inside Mike's,
It agitated them.
oh
is
my
what
gosh,
for us.
they were mad.
And then we tried putting, there's a little escape piece that fits in here. This is like a one-way door. Why are you laughing, Dave?
I've never seen a bee go through that.
No, Joke. And I'm not trying to, you buy what you want to buy, you give it a try. It did not work for us. We now use fume boards. And our spray, we use Honey Be Gone, and it's, I believe it's isopropyl alcohol, cinnamon, and clove oil.
Yeah, we have that here. Was Phil
Fume
Westra?
board.
Phil
Fume
had one, or-
Yeah,
Wait,
yeah, Phil Wester brought one.
Dean had a fume board.
So maybe that was Dean that had that. I could smell
Oh, is it
that
Dean?
thing.
Yeah, so Dean, I think, was using the stinky stuff in his.
I could smell it when I was.
Yeah.
standing over there.
Ours has got, the Honey Be Gone, it smells kind of good, but it's strong. I mean, you don't want to get it, you don't want to get it where it blows at you, because it's powerful. But it doesn't take much, it's got that absorbent side that just, I think we do 2, maybe 3 squirts on it, set it down, and then that black side,
Make them all.
and then I'll go over to this one,
Have to take
do it, by the time I've got it set up, I come back, lift this up, they're gone.
Yeah.
It's all the way down there.
I remember
All
talking
the-
about
Yeah, so then you take
Yeah,
that
'cause
somewhere
somewhere
off.
Too long.
And you've got to hit that fume board again with another spray or 2 before you put it back in the next one. So when Donna and I are out on honey harvest, honey collection, between the two of us with 2 fume boards working back and forth, it's quick. So that's what we do now.
Phil, how many times a year do you harvest honey?
We only harvest once a year.
Like
That's us.
When?
When there's no more Captain Honey coming in, when there's.
Is that July or is
Done.
that September?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. You know, it's just like John was talking about, Then we're talking and he says, we haven't had rain forever. I said, geez, we've had 3.5 inches over the last week and a half. And I've got flowers and I drive down here, or I think there were times I've told you, I said, hey, we've got yellow clover, sweet clover blooming up here, and yours has been done for a week.
Yeah.
Ours is just opening up.
Yep.
You know, we're continuing to convert grown pasture at our place into pollinator plots as well. So that gives me some indicator from a lot of different flowers from early to late. This year we have really good luck with goldenrod. This year we're planting a much larger strip of goldenrod. Not a palatable honey for us, but phenomenal for bees. And our general rule of thumb is when the goldenrod blooms, we pull honey. That's just where we're at.
Yeah, so like you said, the goldenrod honey, most people don't like. So if the bees are starting to bring it in, you want to pull your honey supers off before they put goldenrod honey in your supers.
Yep.
There's a lot of different ways to do it. I mean, it depends on the beekeeper, it depends on where you're at, it depends on the year. One thing to think about, you need to get the mites under control in the fall. Somebody was asking me last week, and I needed to reiterate, you need to take care of the bees that take care of the bees that live through winter.
Yep.
So a lot of times people around here are trying to pull the honey off in August because most of the treatments for mites you can't use while the honey supers are on. And if you don't get treatment by the middle of August, it's getting out to where it's kind of too late. Some of the treatments are temperature sensitive, so if it's too cool, they're not going to work. Some of them, if it's too hot, they're going to work too fast. So yeah, there's a whole lot of variables as far as when do you harvest the honey or when should you, but I've been doing it in August the last couple of years. My bees are just north of Sioux City. I mean, literally across the Sioux City limits. And I think that if we have nectar coming in after the first week of August, it's a miracle. I think every year. I mean, it's hard to tell unless you go out into the hive every day and count the frames that have nectar in them. I mean, you can tell when it's really, really on, and then after a while you get to thinking, it doesn't seem like it's coming in, but literally you'd have to go out and check every day to say for sure it's stopped. But I don't think that our nectar flow or my nectar flow goes past the first week of August ever. So then that's a good time to harvest what's there, get the mite treatments on, and then if we're lucky, we have another fall flow, and that end of August, 1st of September, a lot of variation, depends on the year, depends on the weather. And the fall flow or the fall bloom rather is kind of important, because around here, the only thing that you'll see very much of is goldenrod and the wild aster, about that big, the purple flower asters. I mean, I can't even think of anything else.
The only thing that we
grows
have that
naturally.
still goes late fall is something that we planted, is called sainfoin. And it was the predecessor to alfalfa. It's a non-bloat hay, but alfalfa was so vigorous and so much more productive. But our sainfoin blooms all the way till frost.
Is that right?
Yeah, it keeps growing.
It's hard to get to grow in certain soils. You might have the right type where you're at.
Yeah, I like some rural arid.
I wish I had alfalfa within 5 miles of my place.
I have a plant, I can't remember the name of it, I never can remember it, but it blooms late summer, early fall. And it is covered with every single type of pollinator that you ever, from sun up to sundown. And it lasts well into frost. I can't remember.
You have to
Is it a cabbage looking kind of plant?
No, I can't remember. I have to ask my wife because it's gonna drive me crazy.
There's another one. I can't remember what. She's the master gardener for us.
Sunflowers last,
Sunflowers that we put on.
Yeah.
And they usually stay up pretty late. Mine did last year, they were up pretty late.
Another indicator too is if you're not sure if you're hitting dirt, if you're hitting where there's no, they will tell you. You open that up and they don't care because things are coming in, and you open it up a week later and they are on point and aggressive. There's a good chance nothing's coming in and they're not defensive to keep all of their resources.
Yep. And I've noticed that last year, maybe the year before too. So I usually end up with some dead outs stored in my garage at home, and there's some leftover honey in the frames.
See,
Oh,
that's,
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm sorry, John.
No, they're fine.
I'm
No,
sorry.
yeah, see,
That's
How am I-
it. They love, yeah, all pollinators love cedar.
Yeah.
So yeah, I end up with some honey in the garage, and there's holes and gaps under the door. So all of a sudden I'm in the garage and there's bees in the garage. And then I don't know what changes. The sun comes out or something, and days and days and days, and they're totally ignoring it. And then all of a sudden I go back in the garage one day and there's bees in there again. So it's like the flow is starting and stopping and starting and stopping. And when the flow is on, they ignore the leftover honey in my garage, and when it's not on, there they are.
Yeah.
So it does turn on and off some years, but we had a drought last year too. So that's probably part of it.
So that there's a scientific, it's called growth. Oh my gosh, I've lost it, GDT, growth something days, growth degree days. That there's a beautiful website where you can track, you just put in your zip code and it tells you what growth degree day we are on like right now. And so what I've been doing, just for me, because I'm kind of a nerd, is dandelions bloom here. What's our growth degree day? So I've been tracking for the last 6 years for when things bloom. And that gives me a fairly accurate, not 100%, but fairly accurate. Hey, we're at growth degree day 18. The last 4 years, dandelion started at 22. So I start looking.
Cool.
That gives me an indicator. I'm at the red maples budded at. So those are the little things you can look for. The other part, I think, as John mentioned before, drive around or take your dog for a walk or whatever, just look at what's around you and take note of things. When you become a beekeeper, you're gonna see flowers and budding trees more than you ever realized existed.
Yep,
You're
that's
thinking
for
like a
sure.
bee.
Yep, you really start to pay attention to what's going on and what's blooming and what's next. Yeah, yeah. Cool. Thought of something that I was going to bring up, and now it escapes me. I might have to have you share some of that information if you've been keeping track for a few years. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's
Keep track for Vermillion and Beersford area because they're different
sure.
between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll send it to you.
You have to spray your brome, get it done.
No, I do something I'm not fond of. I till,
Oh, yeah.
at least for it first, and then I think we're gonna have to eventually go to till black plastic combination for some of our
Choke it
really
out.
tough areas. I've heard if you till, I've read, if you till in the spring of black plastic, that it will just cook the rhizomes hard enough that then next year you can,
Oh, okay.
yeah, not that year, but next.
Cause
year.
I have 2 acres, there's that, that cooperation with that bee, that.
Being butterfly habitat
Yeah,
fund.
and so I have 2 acres that I
Yeah.
can put in that, and, but it's all brome, and I hate spraying, I don't wanna.
I'm not a fan of spring either.
Brome grass is
doesn't it
really
suggest
hard.
it on there,
It is.
on that website?
They want you to spray, yeah, you have to have it, well, you don't have to before you apply, they want it ready to go.
Yeah, their being butterfly habitat fund, their approach to getting them established is spray, if it's brome grass, it's a particular, spray it with Roundup to kill it.
Yeah.
Plant soybeans for a year, Roundup ready soybeans, so you can continue to spray it with Roundup, and then in the fall, they would plant the seed mixture. And that's what's working for them. I hate Roundup too, but brome grass is just so hard to get rid of.
It's a challenge.
Yeah,
Tall bluestem will eventually choke it out, but it takes a long time for it to take place.
I have a friend of mine that has a pretty big chunk of native prairie that he put in set aside, and I've been going out there the last 3 years and harvesting seeds, and I've just been broadcasting them everywhere I can. And it's starting to take hold. It is, but I gotta get the brome guy.
you need to add to that, get Phil to take some of his cows out there, where you've been broadcasting the seed, and roll out a hay bale.
Stomp them, yeah.
Let them eat it and stomp it in,
Yeah.
and it's amazing, I guess, the difference that'll make when some animals have walked
I
the
just need
seed
a
down
couple
in.
buffalo, that's what.
Couple
Yeah,
buffalo.
Buffalo are
Yeah.
actually the best ones at it.
Yeah.
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 Cause they keep moving.
Buffalo?
What's that?
You have buffalo?
No, I said I need a couple
You
more
want
pieces,
one?
but,
You
I
need
need
a
those.
big fence.
need about an 8 foot
Working
wire
for me.
fence. Hot wire.
I'm done with the goat world.
A white pickup, not a red one.
So did everybody get the link that I sent for the Iowa Honey Producers Association? Okay. Did any of you get signed up?
I did.
I did.
Signed up? Okay, good, good. Somebody emailed that they were having trouble with it, so I wanted to make sure that it was working. Awesome.
Where do you get, your seed from?
I use Outside Pride.
And local,
No,
like your goldenrod and stuff, you buy
actually the goldenrod, I broke the law
and just
and pulled seed heads from the state park.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, whatever.
Well,
I
I
mean,
have
if you
that.
want to, it's okay, I'll say, yeah, I'll pay the fine, and then put it on our pasture down along our creek.
Yeah.
And it took off, and so I've just been every time going. And then we were traveling somewhere, I don't remember, and it was an open public ditch, and it was some of the most massive, beautiful goldenrod I've ever seen. I thought, you're right.
Yeah. So out at Whit, there's a native prairie that they've got established behind the dorms. And there's a Wild Ones organization in Sioux City.
Oh,
We've
yeah, I
had 'em-
belong to those guys.
Okay, we've
Yeah.
had them talk at the Bee Club before, and they gather seeds every year. So I went out to Whit at one of their meetings, and the one at Whit, and it's like almost any state done natural habitat, you can legally go and harvest seed from them. Maybe not in a state park, but these restoration projects. And so I've been out to that one a couple of times, and then where my bees are at, there's some that's been restored to native prairie. So yeah, I just walk through with a 5 gallon bucket, collect everything I can. I have no idea what it is or if it's gonna grow or I replant it, but yeah, that's.
The
a great
Wild
way to do
Ones
it.
that's a good organization.
They
to
are.
Join, it's not very expensive, but they have plant sales and they swap seeds and all that stuff, and they have a lot of stuff on pollinator.
Bacon Creek has really good goldenrod too.
Yeah.
So if you ever walk in those trails.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, harvest a couple of handfuls.
So Dave, how about mistakes you made your first year of beekeeping?
No, let's talk about yours instead.
We can talk about mine. I have plenty.
No, we had the class, we took this class, and then, got into it, pretty quick. I would say there's panic that happens in there in that first year when you don't know what's happening, or when things are happening like too fast. All of a sudden you open the hive and there's too many bees, or too many drones, or there's too much work home, or stuff like that. I mean, I remember shooting photographs in the first years when I opened the hive, and all of a sudden it looked like it was just full of drones. So I shot pictures immediately and sent them to John and the guys up at the beekeepers.
Susanna?
Yeah, and I mean, it was Ron and Dean, I think, was probably involved in that. And immediately they responded right back and said, no problem. I mean, yeah, you've got a pretty high percentage right there on that frame of drones, but you need drones. And so, but yet I had been researching online and looking at everything I could see online just to try to get ahead of some of this. And in some of those circumstances, they were getting rid of drones. They were getting rid of that drone comb in there. So that was a confusing factor. But the worst of the whole experience in the first year was when it came time to harvest. And you'll love this. We started to take, and believe me, I had watched 100 videos on how to do this and ignored every one of them.
Because you already decided what you're gonna.
I already decided what to do.
6-year-old boy. Hey, I'm right here.
But, The issue was that we took the frames out of the supers and diligently put them in a different super. No, that's not what I did. I took the top off the supers, took the supers off the hives, and then attempted to get the bees out of the supers. After the fact. This is not the way you do this. You take the frames out and take the bees off one at a time and put them in a different box. But if you take the supers full of bees up to Dean's house to extract the honey, you've now got a robbing situation because he's got 30 hives in his backyard, and you've got honey supers full of honey and bees. So now you have robbing taking place at the extraction location. It was a near catastrophe. It was unbelievable, actually. The number of bees that were inside of my Suburban was staggering. And I had literally blown probably 8, 10 supers full of bees with a compressor, had blown the bees out of these supers and put the supers in instead of removing the frames. It seemed much more efficient to me.
I've seen that work in your defense. I've seen
Right.
that work, but I wonder if what happened is as soon as you get all the bees out, you've got to put that box on a flat surface and put a lid on it. The bees
Or a
can't
wet
get
towel.
back in.
Or wet towels.
Wet
is what it
towels,
was for me,
okay,
right?
okay.
Ugh.
Yeah.
That was notorious. That was
Yeah.
a catastrophe.
So leaf blower and just stand the whole box up and with the top bars towards you, because there's more open on the bottom bars, and then you just leaf blower in between the frames, and that's the way a lot of the commercial guys do it. So I've
Yeah.
seen that work in your defense.
It was-
Didn't work
it
for
was-
you.
It was not working. Anyway, we got up there and then had to take the frames out one at a time and blow them up. But the funniest part was that Dean was not home. When we got there.
He was there.
So he was not home. He said, just go in the basement and the extractor's down there. I had only been doing it for 3 months. I didn't know.
Sure.
And so, I mean, we're well set up for it. If you've been there, it's
Yeah,
perfectly
it's
set up for the
because-
extracting, if you know what you're doing.
So you got honey on your first year?
Oh, yeah, 200 pounds of first year. Mhm. Yeah, all from scratch, we put nukes in, but it was all from all brand new foundation.
And
all
now
brand
he
new
says,
boxes.
I wish there was alfalfa within 5 miles of my bees.
Yeah, that's
I
what
think
said.
you've got a good location.
I have a bunch of alfalfa by my house.
That's good.
Yeah.
You're lucky you.
Yeah.
I
The
have
problem
corn
is
and
they come in
soybeans,
so
if you need it.
soon.
Yeah,
Let
but
it flop.
corn
Corn and
soybeans.
soybeans, that's what I
They'll
have.
still find it.
I think there's a lot of variety. Between my bees and your bees, every time I drive that direction, there's crown vetch and all
there's
kinds of
stuff out
stuff
there.
out there. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's there.
I don't know if there's, the bigger factor is learning. You can't make the mistakes fast enough. You have to wade through all of it and make the mistakes because you just can't learn it any other way.
And know that you're gonna make it.
Oh,
And
yeah,
it's okay.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's okay.
So I have a controversial question, okay, because I've been reading a lot for many years, but has anybody ever heard of letting your hives swarm and catching those swarms to strengthen your hives?
Like reintroducing them.
No,
Bring
just
it back
like,
to that.
no, just I've read a
To
lot
build up.
about the swarming aspect of the hives and how it strengthens the hives because the best of the best is what's.
In nature, that's
Survival of
true.
the
Yeah.
I've heard that it produces poor like you don't get much honey from a swarm hive.
Right.
Yes.
So you
They're
lose
interested
half,
in
you
raising
lose
brood,
half
that
of your
makes sense.
resources.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I would say if you have the environment where you had some feral bees
Yeah.
around that would benefit from the swarm, then fine. They're gonna do that anyway in the natural progression. If you don't, if you're all tame bees, you haven't gained anything.
Yeah.
You've lost bees in the process. Yeah,
Just let them fill our
Yep.
hollow trees.
and if you
Yeah.
got a neighbor, even if you have a neighbor that you would gain bees from, or you would mix the two, you're gaining then. But
Yeah.
if you're just doing your own, within your own apiary, it's not, no benefit.
So the chances of you catching your own swarm, I mean, you can put bait hives all around and you may catch your own swarm. And
You
it's
can
not,
do it.
yeah, it's not like.
And I've done it because that first initial swarm out of the hive, the queen is not gonna go more than about 150 yards at the most in the first landing. If you're standing there when it happens, they're gonna go right over there and stay there damn near overnight.
Yeah.
But if you're not, the next hop is gonna be a lot further away.
Yeah, they tend to try and find a new hive that's a ways away from the old hive.
Right.
And that's just, just
And if you're
genetics
lucky,
or the way it's
Wherever
evolved.
she lands is low. And
Yeah.
not the top of that 40-foot ash tree.
Yeah.
Mine was at a base of an evergreen.
Yeah.
That looked good.
Well, and I'm looking at it from the aspect of not honey production, but they're carrying good genetics. Kind of like, what Phil Wester's talked about is getting these I'm in medicine. I'm a nurse. I know, so I look at it like, okay, there's Western medicine, like what I practice, but there's also, non-traditional medicine too. And I think there's a lot of correlation with raising bees too. There's the commercial piece of it, but there's also some other ways to do things that.
You're in the spiritual bee world now.
I don't want to go there. I'm.
No, you are in this setting, and with tame bees, that's where you are. You're not in commercial beekeeping.
Yeah, right. But I'm just saying, like, my 30,000 foot of this is like, okay, some of the practices that we're doing that fall in line with commercial beekeeping seem to completely disrupt the whole.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The whole
They're
perfection
commercial
of
beekeepers-
natural beekeeping. And I know there's a big,
Commercial beekeepers are just ruthless
yeah,
when it comes to handling bees, and that's one of the problems that I have in particular with the Siouxland beekeepers. Is you've got a number of commercial guys up there, and they talk a different language. Not that they can't instruct you on what to do,
right.
but they have a whole different approach to some of this stuff. And
they have to.
they have to,
Yeah.
they for sure do.
Yeah.
I'm not a big proponent for moving those hives from here to California. To me, that makes this much sense. You are disrupting the whole apiary when you do it, number one. Number two, you're mixing all your bees with global bees. Okay, that's fine. But 9 times out of 10, those bees went to Texas.
Yeah.
And 50% of them came back with mites and or Africanized bees in them.
Oh, yeah.
So the part of what Dave's talking about is the almond pollination.
Yeah.
The almonds are very finicky. There's only a couple of places in the world where they do well, and one of them is a certain valley in California. Something like 90% of the world's almond production happens in this little strip in California. And I've heard the inspectors say if you wanted to design a more perfect way of spreading bee disease, you couldn't come up with a better way than send them all
To one spot.
Over 80% of all of the United States bees go to that small area of California to pollinate the almonds. They all get mixed up. So if there's a disease, it's passed around. And then they go back out to Texas and Florida and pollinate other things. And they go to North Dakota and South Dakota and pollinate or make clover honey. So, you concentrate them into one little area and then spread them all out so that the 20% of the bees that didn't go to California get exposed to the 80% that did. And that's the reality. That
In
is what's
California, the
happening.
first ones are raising their hands saying, you can't have any mites coming in here with these pollinator bees. They won't allow 2 mites in a hive to go pollinate in almonds.
They inspect for a
They inspect
lot of stuff.
Every one of them.
Yeah. But the other thing I've heard recently, some commercial beekeepers saying, we've been trucking bees around the country for 75 years, pollinating things. All of a sudden CCD and these mites come along and we get blamed for everything.
Yeah, right.
You know, the bees were fine 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years, well, maybe not 30, but they were fine and they were doing this, maybe not to the scale that they're doing it today. So there's two sides to every.
Or maybe the scale was larger. They could have been perfect before the mites came along.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was much easier to move them and to not have these kinds of problems.
Yep.
But
Yeah, that's something that you don't think about is scale. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, think about the trucking availability now that probably wasn't there
Right.
50 years
Sure.
ago.
Yeah.
and the scale of the almond crop is
Yeah, right.
staggering.
Yes, it is.
It's unbelievable.
It is.
You would
Yep.
think it would make more sense financially for them to just have their own bees.
They don't have food all year.
Yeah, the rest of the year when the almonds aren't
Just
blooming.
that pollination period, and then there's nothing for the bees to eat.
Yeah.
There's, I watched a webinar recently from,
It's a lot of sugar.
Well, it's a lot of diesel fuel for them semis
Yeah.
too.
Truth.
I watched a webinar recently that I think it's Project APHIS M has started
Plant
working
under-
with the
they can
almond
plant under
growers.
the almond trees. you know?
Exactly, they're planting, they've figured out a couple of different crops that they can plant as a cover crop under the almonds. It doesn't bloom at the same time as the almonds, so the bees are out and they're working the almonds when they should be, but then the cover crop is there after or before. And the cover crop is keeping the grass and the weeds down, and it's cheaper than the chemicals that they were using to keep the bare ground. So there are some people looking to do that. But yeah, other than the almonds, there's literally nothing in that valley because they've controlled it all so that the almonds are the only thing that's there. So yeah.
There's not much pollen in lettuce.
Yeah.
Or peppers. I mean, there's
Onions.
Yeah.
I wonder what that honey would taste.
Or like garlic, like would it get that flavor?
Gilroy.
might.
Yeah.
It might, yeah.
It might.
It'd be crazy.
So I have, that's one of the things that bloom in my garden is the garlic chives, the
Oh,
white
yeah.
blooms.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's nothing else, the bees are all over it. And I've wondered, does that honey pick up a garlic?
See, that's funny, because our
taste.
honeybees ignore it, but the bumblebees love our
Is
chives.
that right? You must have something else that blooms at the
Yeah,
same
there's
time.
something else going on, that they're all
Yeah.
happy with that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I grow, so.
So when I started out, I got a lot of my information from Michael Bush, bushfarms.com, I think. And he was at that time in Greenwood. Now he's south of Omaha. Michael Bush has been a treatment-free beekeeper for 30 years. So my plan was to not treat. I actually started out with 2 top bar hives that my dad helped me build. Top bar hives, there's no gap in between the frames. So you can literally move the frames apart and pull one out and all the rest of the frames aren't exposed. And made it myself. It's all natural wood. So my plan was to not use any chemicals and not put any plastic in. I evolved, I guess. So one of my first mistakes, I put them in the windbreak out at my acreage, and things went fine the first year, and then we had one of those years where we had snow 12 feet tall, and here's my 4-foot tall top bar hive under 12 foot of snow. I had to go and dig them out, and it was like we put a ratchet strap around the bottom of them and lifted them up. It was like lifting a coffin up out of the ground. So that was one of my big mistakes. My first year was location. It's never got that much snow in that spot since then, but I've never put my bees back. But I started out, I wasn't going to treat. I actually got one nuke from Michael Bush, which his bees haven't been treated, so maybe they don't have mites. And the first year, like I said, they got snowed in. I dug them out, took them back home to Sioux City. That spring, they were alive. They survived being buried in the snow. And as soon as it warmed up, I moved them back out to the acreage. And I don't know if it was coincidence or having just moved them. They both died. I mean, just boom, 3 weeks later, they were gone. So I think I did a cutout, caught a swarm, and then I bought bees over the years. My plan was always to get enough, 10 or 12 that I could raise some queens off of them and locally mated, because when you buy a package or when you buy a nuke, most of the time you have no idea where the queen came from, or if you do, it's just some Florida queen or Georgia queen or California queen that hasn't been bred to survive up here. So I don't know how many years I went trying to get to that sustainable spot like you were talking about, where I had enough hives that I could lose some every winter, because you're always going to lose some, but then I could recover from it. And they were all my queens and they were all locally mated. And I just never got there. And I'm still not there. This year I went into winter with 11 hives and I've got 2 that have survived. So I've read some articles, been quite a few years back now, by Randy Oliver, where he came up with a plan for developing mite-resistant queens and mite-resistant bees. And he said, you need to take about 1,000 hives and stop treating them, because you can't find the genes or the bees that are surviving without treatments if you're treating all of them. And that's the theory that a lot of the treatment-free people are going with, is you've got to stop treating them to ever develop bees that'll survive without the treatments. So Randy Oliver says you take 1,000 hives, you stop treating them, but you keep checking them for mites. And you identify the ones that aren't doing well, and you treat them, and you pull them out of your project, or pull them out of those 1,000 hives. And then come fall, you'll have who knows how many that you didn't have to treat. And if the mite counts are low enough, treat them like you would any other hive, as far as feeding them and getting them ready for winter, and you see what survives the winter. And next year you've got all of these hives that you didn't treat that maybe you start breeding from. And he said out of those 1,000 hives, he expected to get maybe 100 in the fall. And out of those 100, he expected maybe 50 to survive the winter. And I'm thinking, 1,000 down to 50. How many years do I have to try this with 5 hives or 10 hives?
About 200.
To get a couple that are,
Uh-huh.
And then the other thing is, everybody else around me, like Dave over here, is buying queens from California and Florida, and my queens are going out and they're mating with his drones.
Yeah.
So it's a noble cause, but it is a hard road to
Is this
hoe.
conversation directed to me?
It is, but it's directed to all of you.
Yes.
Yes, it is 100%.
But it's not because I'm trying to tell you that you're
No,
wrong.
I know. No, that's why
I've
I
been
said
there.
I don't want to start a controversial topic.
And it,
But
in my opinion, it's not controversial, and
Yeah.
it shouldn't be. When you get commercial beekeepers and backyard beekeepers who want to breed bees that don't need mites, it shouldn't be controversial. But there's some heated conversations, and I've never been experienced to any of them. I mean, I've rubbed shoulders with people up in Sioux Center and commercial guys, and I've never had anybody say, oh, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And what I've evolved to now is I check them all for mites, and I treat the ones that need it. And I'm still trying to raise queens. So if I find a hive that I have to treat, the next thing I want to do after treating it is try and replace it with a different queen that I didn't have to treat. And like I mentioned earlier tonight, at the very least, I don't want those drones out there to mate with my bees or anybody else's bees. If they needed to be treated, then they need to be pulled out of my program. And in my operation, that means pinching the queen and putting a new one in there. Sometimes, it might be pinch the queen and let them raise a new one, because the genes might be there. It's just this particular queen isn't expressing them.
Yeah.
So that's an option too. So I'm progressing to, we need to find the queen breeders who are already doing this and doing it on scale. I just listened to Beekeeping Today podcast where they interviewed Danny Weaver from Bee Weaver. Used to be Bee Weaver Queens, but it's Bee Weaver something else now. And that's what he's done. I'm not sure how many years he said that he's been doing it, 20 or over
Long
20.
time.
Yeah, not treating them or
Yep.
monitoring and getting rid of the ones that needed treatment. And
He's got kind of an isolated situation there.
does
too.
he?
Mm.
So yeah, he's been doing it in the same area long enough that he's influenced the drones around it, like you're.
Well, that's kind of
swarm.
right. Yeah, so I'm looking at not just from like the mite issue, but
Mhm.
the greater good of, like, I think the more feral bees you have in your area, probably the better off you're gonna be, because those hives are surviving on their own. And
Yeah.
those drones probably are gonna breed with the queen that may go
Yeah.
out, and,
You bet.
you know.
When I started out, when I first took my first beginning beekeeping class, there were people who would tell you at that time there are no feral bees left because they thought that the mites
Got 'em all.
had decimated them. And very true at that time, you noticed a huge cutback. I mean, there were apple orchards. The class I took was UNL, so it was down at Lincoln. And they were talking about their apple orchards all over the place around Lincoln that have never needed to have bees come in before, and they can't get their apples pollinated because all of the feral bees are dead. Well, part of it was a lot of the feral bees did die, but some of them survived, but not enough, that people were noticing them, but they have rebuilt. There are bees out there surviving on their own without treatments. That a couple Saturdays ago, the webinar that we did with the Black Hills Bee Club, Tom Seeley talked about the Arnott Forest. So the Arnott Forest is kind of interesting in that he had done a study before the varroa mites came around, and he found all of these wild beehives and documented where they were. And I think they must have taken bee samples and frozen them. And then he kind of forgot about it, and then the varroa mite hit. And probably 8 or 10 years after the varroa mite hit, he went back to the Arnott Forest, found a bunch of wild bee colonies again. I guess it's big enough that it's not really influenced by hobby beekeepers or commercial beekeepers. They're wild bees. And so he figured out that there were just as many wild bee colonies as there were before. And then he took samples and he compared the samples, and he figured out that something like, if you remember, correct me, I want to say like 88% of the wild bees had died, and the bees that were left had repopulated from the 12% that survived.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, it's gone through a cycle. There are bees out there that are surviving without the mites, and I'm hearing more. And it used to be I'd hear somebody say, "Well, so and so has bees that are treatment free and mite free, and they're surviving," and there was all kinds of bad press or bad evidence. Oh, he's lying, or he is treating them and not telling you, or it's a bunch of BS. Nobody believes it. Now, like Danny Weaver has supposedly got bees that are mite resistant. And I'm hearing there's some other people. I'm hearing, Russian bees, we've heard for a long time, have some advantages. The hygienic bees, the ankle biters. So I think the focus now should be trying to find people who really are paying attention to the queens that can survive without mites, or at least survive with fewer treatments, and we need to start buying queens from them. And Phil Westra is a perfect example, because his bees are coming from Kirk Webster. I remembered it. And Kirk Webster has been a treatment-free beekeeper in Vermont, I don't know, 30 years maybe. He's got a good website. I think it's kind of outdated, but for anybody, he's got, at least it used to be, Kirk Webster's website was a year in the apiary. In December, he's putting frames together and putting boxes together. And it's like everything that he does he's not a commercial, but he survives off of the little bit of farm that he has and the bees that he has. But anyway, Phil Westra, I'm pretty sure, we'd have to check with him to be positive, but I think that's where he got his bees, was from Webster. And now he's been in our area, 2 or 3 years? So they're mating with our local bees. So I'm really excited about getting some of his bees and continuing to try and raise my own. But it's just one guy can't do it, and maybe a club could, or maybe a commercial operation that's paying attention to the right things could do it.
So
That's right.
Do you think you lost your colonies to the mites, or was it weather?
I checked them all last year. It's interesting story. So I had, I don't know, 10 or so hives that were from queens that I raised. and I had 2 nukes that I bought last year. And the 2 nukes, one of them tested about 30 mites in a sample of 300. The other one actually was crashing when I went to test it. So it wasn't even worth testing, and I'm sure it was mites that got it. So the one that tested 30 or above 30, I treated it, but it crashed before I could really do much about it. My queens tested 3, 4, and one of them was a 5, and one of them was 6 mites, and everything else was 3 or below of the queens that I raised. But they're also in the same yards where the 2 nukes crashed. So when those nukes crashed, maybe those mites moved into the hives that I had going on. That's something else that I was going to talk about too, is trying to learn your strong points and your weak points. And my weak point is I get overwhelmed sometimes toward the end of the year, and I don't have a good enough handle on how strong each hive is. I think something that would really help me, and that I recommend all of you do, is always take notes every time you look in a hive. So I was up to almost 22 hives at one point last year because I'm raising queens, and some of them are 3 frames of bees, but it still is 22 hives, and I don't take good records, and I miss things. And the bees unfortunately suffer from it sometimes. So, you know, you may only have 2, but you still may not remember the last time I was in this, how many frames of bees did it have? How many frames of brood did it have? How much honey did it have? And with only 2, you've got the time to take some good notes. So every time you're in there, that's one thing you should get in the habit of. You count the seams of bees to figure out how many frames of bees we have. And if it's, you know, if it's not complete, you can say, well, that's 50% or that's 25%. And you don't have to pull every frame out and count every frame of honey and every frame of brood each time you're in there, but you should at least estimate it every time. And then look at those notes before you go back into it the next time.
Are you doing good notes?
Yeah, I'm a note taker.
Yeah.
And I've got my own shorthand. I think I gave you guys copies of different things. Find what works for you.
Yep.
So like for me, I just do a quick jot on a scrap piece of paper, but I know 7 PBX94 means something for me when I get back inside.
Yeah,
Dean has the most copious notes I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Anywhere. He has a notebook, spiral
Yeah.
notebooks.
So
So
you
you
can
tell
just-
you how many bees he had in
Yeah.
the 1900s.
You can,
No, he
you
knows
can
how
take
many
those, take those notes back with you and, you know, look at them before you go out the next time. And you can figure out, you can make in your notes, okay, I need to bring this next time, or we need to make sure that this hive has eggs next time, or whatever. But I think that's a lot of my downfall, is I lose track of what hive needs what.
And it's easy to do.
It
You think,
is.
I'm gonna remember this, and
Yep,
yeah, no,
you
you
will not remember it.
Yeah, yeah, it's very, very easy to do. Yeah. And then some of my hives, like I said, the bees kind of suffer sometimes from my being unorganized. And so a couple of them were small, and I understand that's what happened. There weren't enough bees in there, and we had some really cold spells, and that's what got them. But one of them was 4 mediums, clear full of honey, heaviest hive I've ever sent into winter, and it died early. The bees were down, the cluster was down below and dead. They had 3 boxes of honey, or 2 boxes of honey above them they didn't touch. I have no idea.
I've got one of those that was the strongest hive. It's got two big beeps, and it's got at least 3 supers on it. And it was really producing. I probably pulled 3 supers off of it. That's gone now.
Yeah.
And it was too cold to get in there to find out what happened. When I moved it, they were there. And after I moved it to the winter location, it was dead almost immediately.
Yep.
And I don't, it probably was mites, and they were treated before they moved.
So, you know, when I've shown that chart and you see the bee population going up and then dropping down, and the mite population going up. So really big hives are really big because at one point they had a whole lot of brood, and that's where the mites reproduce. So a lot of times really big hives can be the ones that end up with a lot of mites.
And the problem is it'll be impossible. It'll be impossible to do the forensics on it because the mites are gone.
Mhm.
And the dead bees are.
We did
Yeah,
a
you could-
wash with water though.
You could sort through and find, get a
And brought
rough
in
estimate.
a sample last week.
Mhm.
It was full of mites.
Oh,
And it was
So
just-
yeah.
You took the dead bees off the bottom board, yeah.
you know,
University of Nebraska does half the hour monthly
Yeah.
and just last Friday, that's what they did. They went through a dead
Oh, I
house.
missed that one.
And I can't think of her name. but the
Judy
professor there-
Woosmart?
Was it?
Judy Woosmart?
Judy, yeah, Judy. She just scooped up a handful of dead bees and just went like this and said, okay, look at my fingers, and there were the mites. So like.
Is that right?
brought in. And just, she said, from what's sticking to my fingers, we know what caused.
Because we thought it was the cold, and
Yeah.
when we looked at them, I mean, they were clustered and they had food, and we thought,
it's never the
what
cold.
happened?
Yeah, how many mice did we find when we just switched that?
Yeah.
Last week, yeah.
It's never the cold.
I mean, there's, there are some people that'll always tell you it's mites too. How many times have you seen on a forum on Facebook, somebody asks a question and the first two responses are, what were your mite levels? What were your mite levels?
Yes.
What did you
What
treat
did you
with?
treat with?
When did you treat?
Yep,
with?
that's
It's
always the
not
first question.
always mites. It's probably usually mites.
Yeah.
But there are other things too. It hasn't been 3-4 years ago, maybe you guys might not have been beekeepers yet. We had a winter where we had 55-degree day where the bees were out and flying. And the next day it got down below zero. And when the bees get all spread out, it's warm and they don't need to cluster up. They have to communicate where they're going to cluster up again. So, I mean, that warm day is a great opportunity for the bees to go and explore and figure out where is the concentration of honey. And then once they decide, they communicate to the rest of the bees somehow, this is where we're going to group up. This is where the cluster needs to be now. So when it's cold, we're on honey. Well, when it goes from 55 to below zero in 24 hours, if they don't get that communicated in time, you get a little cluster over here and cluster over here and a bunch of bees all over the place, and they all freeze. And we had that happen, maybe it's been about 6 years ago. And I think did I have one hive survive that year? I think maybe I had one hive survive that year. I don't remember how.
Could you make like a little box that's insulated that you can put over a hive for like
You
a
could.
situation like that?
You could, and I think I mentioned earlier tonight, I think we need to start talking more about ways of insulating, because the rule of thumb or the general consensus before was, bees don't heat the whole hive anyway, they just heat the cluster, they just heat their local area, and bees have been surviving without insulation for years and years. Well, my bees aren't surviving real well, so I'm thinking maybe some top insulation, some side insulation.
Frederick Dunn is doing pretty good studies on those with his 20 hives. And he's now focused on that insulation and particularly the top cover.
Yeah.
And managing the moisture inside that top cover. So you've got to get that, and then you've got to have insulation under that metal cover so that doesn't cause a condensation, but.
Yeah, there's a
Some of
lot
the
of
stuff-
concerns there.
Some of the stuff that I've been reading is good ventilation, and then they put a pillow underneath that top cover. Like I don't know if they leave a super up there, and they put a pillow full of wool up there, and just that adds
I use
enough.
burlap and put
Yeah.
burlap in an empty super up top there.
Yeah.
These are
With vents.
moisture box with burlap and wood shavings on top of that. with
Okay.
side
Yeah,
vents.
burlap and wood chips or wood shavings.
Yeah,
So
and that keeps the condensation off, under control.
at the Iowa Honey Producers Association this year, the main speakers were Randy Oliver and Michael Palmer, the queen rearer. And one of them, it wasn't even in his topic, just happened to be one of the things that he mentioned at the end is you got to have an upper entrance to get that moisture out. And the other one says, you
No way.
can't have an upper entrance, your bees are going to freeze. You got to deal with the moisture other ways. And I think maybe why, and neither one of them were talking about that, but they both knew who the other main headliner was. And so they must have a thing going on. Cause yeah, one of them swears by upper entrances and one of them says you can't have them. So if you have an upper entrance, yeah, that moisture can get out. But another thing you can do is tip the hive so that if the condensation does come up and hit the inner cover and condense, it runs to a wall and runs down a wall.
They need the moisture.
They need the moisture. That's what the other one is saying. You let all the moisture out and you feed them dry sugar. What are they gonna mix that dry
There's
sugar
no
with
spit.
to eat?
They
Nothing.
got no spit.
They got no spit. You're right.
And if you're
So-
running a solid bottom like that, I have screen bottoms on mine year round,
Oh, do you?
I do. If you run a solid bottom like that, in my opinion, it needs to be tipped anyway, because you've got any snow that melts and it runs that way, now we've got a freezing problem in there.
An
Yep.
icicle
So that-
inside.
It's
Yeah.
just gradual, doesn't have to be very much.
Yeah, you don't have to put much in the back
No.
to give it that.
Our
that
nukes are
tilt.
solid bottoms with a tip, but our production hives are all screens.
And if you're foundationless, you've got to level them, but
Yeah.
not necessarily front to back. You can tip them so the moisture will run out the front. You just got to level them side to side so they draw out straight frames. So yeah, you definitely could come up with lots of ways of insulating them. I know Dean uses those pre-purchased black
Yeah,
wraps that add some insulation, and the black color sucks up some
Those
some
tend to
heat
be
and some sun.
just windbreaks, basically.
Yeah,
They're
there's
good
a
wood
little
breaks, there's no doubt
insulation,
about that. They're nice. They'll
Something.
grow on and off quick.
Something that somebody said in that Saturday webinar made me think about putting insulation under the upper cover and maybe even figuring out a way of putting insulation around that top box. Might have been Tom Seeley.
The heat's going up,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
stopping it from up top and controlling the condensation is really the key.
Yeah.
My most successful, my first year, I didn't lose any hives in the winter. And that's exactly what I did. I pulled them into a sheltered area and then put burlap. I put burlap in half of them and put sawdust, chips, wood chips in the other. By far, the better option was burlap.
Is that right?
Well, you can put a feeder in there
Yeah.
early and leave it late and still have the wood chips in there, making a problem.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I'd put my wood chips in a burlap bag, but yeah.
There you go.
I can move it if I need to. But
Yeah.
it's pretty.
But I've got special boxes too.
Box over with wool around it, that's something that goes way back to the 1800s, Poland, Russia.
You know, Russia,
Yeah.
it's run, I've been
Yeah.
reading a lot about Russian beekeeping and it's, they're walled hives
Yeah.
and they're full of wool and then they have pitched tops.
Yeah.
and They're full, then they have vents at the top and they,
If you're gonna
It's
do
like the
insulated
beekeeper
hives,
works at
have you
home.
seen the
Yeah,
Vino,
yeah.
have you seen the Vino Farms, YouTubes? Okay, so look, try to remember to look for it.
my brain's almost full though.
I know. Because he redesigned the hives to be super insulated,
Hmm.
all the way up. He also redesigned the frames, so they were double stacked, they were double deep. Inside double,
A lay inside, that's a lay inside.
no, this is not landside, this is his own design,
Oh, it is, so,
He just did it.
yeah, okay, yeah.
so it's similar to that.
Similar to
But then
lands.
he's got a 4-inch thick wall
Sure.
around the whole thing, and still can have access to the top.
Okay.
And, we're kind of waiting to see what happened over the winter here. He's gonna be coming out of it pretty soon, you know.
Yeah.
But he's in New York.
Okay,
That's in,
somewhere
Interesting.
comparable to what we have.
I was
Yeah,
not
yeah.
happy with his redesign of the frames, but beyond that,
Yeah.
the hives look pretty cool.
So with your wool in between, your wool insulation in between a couple of walls, you wanna, I would think you wanna make sure that the mice can't get into that,
It's, it's completely sealed.
completely
Yeah,
sealed. when you-
yeah.
That's
It's-
cool.
Yeah. They're
Interesting.
2x8s
Interesting to see it.
2x10s, and then
Okay.
they're, I mean, it's,
Another thing on the inside, if you have the option of getting, when you say 2x, if they're not planed, that would be great, because if it's rough on the
yeah,
inside,
rough, yeah.
yeah, the bees will line it with propolis, and that propolis is supposed to really help the bees out. Propolis envelope.
And we rough up our new boxes.
What do you rough them up with?
I've got just a little wire brush that goes at the end of my or an angle grinder,
Oh, okay.
and just go up and down with that on
Yeah.
all sides.
And then they tend to propolis it over. I need to come up with a way to roughen mine up.
I did it last year, we'll see what happens there, but I used like some 60 sandpaper on the belt sander.
Yeah.
Okay.
They sell all kinds of things now that you
Yep.
can really gouge things with and take your fingers off, all kinds of stuff.
So I don't want anyone to feel like you need to stay, and I don't want anyone to feel like you have to go. We can sit around and talk as long as you want. I did want to say I appreciate the effort that you all put in for the class. I think it went a lot better this year. It seemed like everybody had gone through the material beforehand, so I didn't have to stand up and read to people a lot. So, and I hope you got a lot out of the class. We will get some open hive inspections scheduled. I don't have it figured out yet. Between you and Dean are going to be our best bets.
Yeah.
Because I don't really have bees where anybody can look at them, and the orchard doesn't have any bees right now.
We can get to work.
Yeah. Does Saturday afternoon work for everybody for something like that? For the most part? Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of hard to do them in the spring after work because it's still getting dark soon enough, and the bees are not real happy when it's sunset and there's a bunch of people trying to peek in the hive and it's still kind of cold out. But Saturday,
I'd prefer to wait till our snow is gone before we. It could be June.
I was gonna say,
Yeah,
I keep seeing rulers sticking out of snowdrifts.
I know it.
On your post
More new
Facebook.
snow, more new snow.
You're talking more this month.
Yeah, Thursday.
We're supposed to get down to 7.
Yeah. And so we talked about
55
tomorrow, the bees will be out flying.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bees should be out tomorrow.
Yeah, Wednesday night could be a killer for our bees. Possibility.
Is it supposed to get cold again?
7.
Yeah,
Real.
yeah, we're going back down to cold again.
Perfect day to test your
We
installation.
win. We win. Did you say this?
Perfect
That's a
time to
sharp
test your
drop
installation
off.
ideas.
Yes.
Get
5 to
some-
7.
Right.
Hard on everything.
Even screwing off like sap.
Yeah.
They can keep going all year. with
Maple-
all their stuff in their
Yeah.
greenhouse.
Get it, get it.
Sounds really fun.
And I was there.
This is it. I was
Yeah.
there.
We should.
Well,
I don't know.
there's some guy in Nebraska. he's-
It might add to our
I think his kids run it, it's
extent.
called gardening in the snow,
Yeah.
he invented this underground
I see
greenhouse, he
that
grows
some of the maple
orange
trees, I see
trees
buds.
and all that in
It's like,
Nebraska.
So
it's
little
orange
orange,
is-
yeah, Saturday's not getting cloudy.
But they're local.
I gotta do it. They gotta try
And
one.
usually gets cloudy when they bud. Some of them bud in January.
And so like that's what
outside.
Some of them buds are down already.
70 all year round.
I think it's.
Isn't that amazing?
She has a lot of fun years.
She
We'll
makes-
probably be hanging out
She
there.
makes-
She makes
makes-
those
It's great to me.
Yeah, I think, uses geothermal, so the winter it's warm, summer it's cool. and-
Yeah.
Other stuff, and then like,
And then
she'll put like.
All in time, right?
Yeah.
Baby steps.
Like a shake the whole dish in the pool. so-
Said we
Yeah,
got
it makes a lot of
helping
cool
to
stuff.
our-
Absolutely. But yeah, it's a good idea, good thoughts, there's something that they can.
I'll be
All
there.
year round, and why would they work year round?
That'd be a good
You
experiment.
never know.
Yeah.
The sunlight,
Always
is
give
so
it a
much
try.
less sun, just like your kids. They go from 38 today to 3.
But it's a greenhouse, it's still this fun.
I gotta stop this recording and then I'm gonna check out the book.
Oh, yeah. I've been reading this one too, and this has been a really good book. It answers a lot of good questions.